meeting in order, Silver Falls School District. Attendance, we're missing Daniel. I believe he's on his way. Haven't heard otherwise. And we'll stand for flag salute.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, entertain a motion on the agenda review.
Move to approve the agenda as published.
Second.
It's been moved in second to approve the agenda as published. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Okay. Entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved in the second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay. Ayes have it. Mr. Tom Buchholz Resignation, which is words I don't like to see together, but I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, I've been kicking it around for a year or so now. My letter says it all. I really just don't have the time to dedicate to it. And just attending all the meetings is not enough. It needs more. And that pretty much is the long and short of it right there. And I feel like I'm not giving Silverton what they need. I've been here a while, need help on a committee or a group, I'll be here. But I just feel like now things are going, so everyone's hired, things are settled, the board's working great, the admin's working great, got everybody hired, teachers ready to go. I think now's a good time for me to step back, let you guys select somebody new and get them up to speed. So I would never have done this if there was turmoil or problematic, and why would I want to add fuel to that fire? But now's a good time, I think, for me to step out and let someone take this chair. So it's been 12 years. No, 14.
14.
So, yeah. Yeah, that's enough.
Well,
This is, my letter, this is some of the finest people on the planet work in this district, and I mean that. So I just.
would you mind if I read your letter?
Oh, please.
And as soon as I get it up here on my computer.
Or I can do it if you like.
Oh, well, go ahead. That'd be
See
great.
if I can remember here.
I got you.
All right, so thanks a lot.
Out of your words or better out of your mouth?
Yeah, I'm resigning my Silver Falls School Board position for Zone 7 effective August 31st, so the end of this month. I hope this allows plenty of time to interview and select my replacement. I have many business commitments that are taking too much of my time and not allowing me to do the type of work that Silver Falls deserves in this challenging time. Being an effective board member requires more than just going to all the meetings. I have great faith that this board will select a competent replacement to fill out my term. I have thoroughly enjoyed my 14 years on the board. The board and administration team are operating solidly and effectively, and if there was any difficulty, I would stay. Thank you all to serve in this finest school district anywhere. You are some of the best people on the planet. May God bless you all, and go Foxes. That's it. I mean every word of that. So.
Well, Tom, just thank you just for your 14 years of service, and I think it speaks a lot of your character. Recognize the attention. I know it wasn't a decision came too lightly, but to recognize that you weren't able to give it the attention it deserved, and like you said, you put in many years, and I enjoyed working with you, and wish you all the best, and thank you for all your guidance.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I really appreciated working with you, Tom. Kind of in a way, you kind of got me started in this business. And so,
Yeah, exactly.
So but I appreciate, and as dovetail on what Derek said, just your experiences you've been able to bring to the board, and 14 years of service to the district in this position, that's giving a lot, and it's very much appreciated, and you will be missed up here. So.
Yeah, thank you.
I apologize for being late, but it was a good month and a half there. It was really nice to work with you.
We'll see you in other venues, Daniel.
Can I make a comment real quick, Mel?
Yes, please.
Hey, thank you, Tom. It is a real, it's been a real pleasure to work with you. I will miss seeing you, and I think that it takes a special person to devote that much time to the school board. I think that you make a real impact in our school and for our kids, and all the tremendous work you've done. We just really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I wanted to, Derek touched on something about getting to work together. The past year or so, I haven't been able to get to know all the new people. I haven't been able to have a sit-down meeting or a conversation or what's going on or walk a building or get to know you guys. And I'm like, that's a problem. And if I can't have the time to kind of get to know you more than just, I'm the guy that sits on the end of the board, then I need to step away and let someone with some more time on their hands.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah,
for sure.
I haven't talked to you outside of this anyway, not enough, so.
Yeah, last fall, it's been a while.
Yeah,
I think last
yeah.
fall we sat down and
Yeah,
chatted.
so just
Yeah.
busy, but it happens, so anyway, thank you.
And I think, Tom, you bring up a good point for all members and future board members, that it's a lot more than just coming to meetings, and which you, of course, and most of us up here recognize. And it takes to do a responsible job takes quite
More
a
than the
commitment,
meeting,
which you more than done for 14
Yep.
years. And
Yep.
So, is this the time where we gotta try to talk about how we wanna do the process? Because it's the only time I see it on the agenda.
Yeah, it's not on here as far as the exact process. Talked some, figured it would be similar to what we, if there's no objections, to similar to what we do with the budget committee, as far as have people get the word out there officially and have people apply that are from Zone 7.
Yep.
Tom's zone and Zone 7, and apply, and then we as a board could interview them and then select from that pool.
So about that policy is pretty vague.
Right.
So but I would absolutely vouch to have somebody from the same zone of which is getting vacated.
Yes.
And the policy is not specific to that.
Other
But
than
I
it
think it's
says
very-
should be.
I think
It's-
yeah,
yeah.
I think it's very important that we do
Yeah.
that. I did reach out to Jonathan Edmonds, talked to him briefly, because he was the last guy that was appointed that I had heard of.
Uh-huh.
And he said, yeah, they received some applications, and I think that's how it works. Then he had to officially rerun.
Right, at the end of the
So
term.
you're just filling, I think, the end of Tom's term,
Correct.
and then you have to rerun like a
Mhm.
regular candidate, so.
Yes,
So it'd be almost 2 more years.
yeah. So-
But thinking back, I think the reason the policy says should be is because what if somebody from that zone doesn't apply?
Yeah, if you end up with
Good
no,
It gives you a little bit of wiggle.
no one steps up from the zone,
Yeah.
and, which totally makes sense, because you want to have the position filled.
I'm assuming that special elections are expensive. Like if we'd have just a regular election in November, because there's one right around the corner.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Expensive?
would be super expensive, and I don't know if we would even make the timeline.
Right.
I don't think
Okay.
we would.
Right.
I think it's probably passed,
Right.
if I had to guess.
And
I think,
It's-
this is standard procedure.
No,
on
I'm
most-
just,
most-
I'm asking.
Yeah,
I think the policy says next regularly.
right.
Next regular board election.
When the term's up, yes.
Yeah.
So does that mean we probably gonna lean heavily on Debbie, right? I mean, how do we get the word out? How do we get that, because we have to do this in less than a month.
Well, two things.
You don't have.
Technically, we don't have to do it within a month.
Oh, 'cause
We
we
can
don't
take
have
our
to.
time.
We don't have to operate with 7.
Right.
No, you can operate with
Right.
6 for a bit.
So
Yeah.
we're not under that squeeze.
Okay.
But obviously, we don't want to drag it out either.
Okay.
Same token. And so we would, but yeah, we'd rely on district staff as far as getting it on our webpage and things like that, of course. Getting those out, and then they'd come in.
Yeah, Debbie's managed this process
Yeah.
before, and she knows
Yeah.
exactly how to get it all out there.
Are there, it's more of a legal question, maybe Anthony might know, is there a minimum notice that has to be given
You mean for the application
for the application,
process?
yeah, for us to post, like, is there a minimum, like, it's 14 days or 30
Yeah,
days?
Yeah, I think so.
So there's some legal pieces we need to make sure we hit as far as like the public
Yeah.
notification piece. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
So do we need to make a motion to embark into this
Yeah, we have to have
process?
a deadline, yeah.
Not really.
No?
And then we have we would have a deadline on the application, and then you guys actually interview them in open session.
Right.
And then you actually vote in open
We'd vote in
session.
open session
Yeah.
also, yes. Yeah.
It's kind of a interesting process.
Yeah.
So this might be something to, for the tail end of the meeting, make sure we get on next agenda as well.
Right, yep. So, well, thank you for your service, Tom. Very much appreciated.
Thanks, Phil.
Before I read through everything, first of all, do we have any public comment from in here? Do we have anyone online
What have we got online, Debbie, anybody?
with a raised hand? If you're online, raise your hand if you want to make a comment, then I'll give the parameters.
And you mean push the button?
Board meetings are so interesting in the dead of summer. Everybody's racing in.
home.
See what we're doing.
Nobody online.
Okay.
Is our
Oh,
Flo
very
Analytics
popular,
guy on?
Okay.
Okay, that one's good.
All right then. Then we have the FLO Analytics, and Alex Brash, I assume, will be online with us?
He's getting promoted.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Can you hear us?
Oh, I can.
Okay.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I could show a PowerPoint presentation. I think that request should be coming through to the... There we go. Okay, and I trust that you guys can see my screen at this point?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So, good evening, everyone. Yeah, my name is Alex Brosh. I'm a population geographer with Flo Analytics, and we're based out of Portland, and that's where I live. But we also have offices in Seattle and Vancouver, Washington. And I'm filling in tonight for my colleague Ethan Poole. He prepared enrollment forecasts for your district. See, these are 10-year enrollment forecasts, so the October 2025 school year is the first forecast year coming up, and that goes through 2034. So just a little bit about Flo. We work with a lot of school districts in Oregon and Washington, helping them do a myriad of demographic and spatial analyses. So the main thing we do is prepare enrollment forecasts, but as you can see, we also help with attendance area boundary reviews, doing demographic and socioeconomic analyses. And yeah, we're a team of demographers, geographers, and GIS analysts. That stands for Geographic Information Systems. So people who are doing mapping and spatial data analysis. And we are based in the Pacific Northwest, but we work with districts really across the country to prepare enrollment forecasts. So the first thing I just wanted to mention is the forecasts for 10 years. We prepare 3 scenarios. We call it the low, middle, and high scenarios for the district-wide. So this number of students is representing all the students enrolled in Silver Falls that live inside the district, but also that live outside the district boundary and enroll with the district. And we prepare them by individual grade and by grade group, and then we'll also do it to the school level, which we'll get to at the very end. So this is just real quick, map of your district. Of course, you guys are familiar. I'm pretty familiar. I just drove through the district yesterday, actually, as I was heading to Mount Jefferson. But yeah, getting it on a map and kind of seeing your attendance areas, and in a little bit we're going to see how we do some analysis of where kids live within the district and what schools they attend, and that gives us a better understanding of transfer rates. So just overarching process to get to enrollment forecast, we like to think of it in three big steps. The first one being enrollment assessment, and that's looking at your historical enrollment. And on that note, just to clarify, this is head count from October. So that's what the enrollment numbers represent for us. And we look at the geographic distribution of student residences, and as I mentioned, the transfer rates, how many students are electing to attend a school that's different from the neighborhood school of the attendance area they live in, and then also how many elect to enroll with Silver Falls from outside the district boundary. Second big task is the demographic characteristics and trends of the district. So we're looking at total population change over time, as well as the number of births and the women of childbearing age that live in the district and total fertility rates. And then residential development analysis, so thinking about where new housing is being built, and specifically what type of housing, if it's single family, multifamily, if we can get the detail on number of bedrooms, that helps us get understanding of the average number of students generated per housing unit. And all of those things feed into the enrollment forecasts. And I'll mention right here, I should have at the beginning, there's definitely time at the end for questions, but feel free to interrupt me along the way if you have a burning question. We just want to tackle it during the presentation.
I do have a question about housing.
Yeah.
In past years, we've looked at housing and we found that families weren't necessarily moving into the new housing developments. It was older people. Have you evaluated that as well?
Yeah, I think we have a slide coming up here. We will show, I don't know if I have off the top of my head in this presentation a comparison to previous student generation rates, as we call them, or student yields. But I will show you how many students we looked at from October 2024 that live in new housing that's been built within the last 10 years. So you have a number that says, on average, there's this many students generated per housing. And I'll kind of get a sense when I look at it in a couple slides here if I feel like that's lower or higher than some of the districts I've worked with in Oregon and Washington. And I can jump into that.
Thank you.
I have a piggyback question on that, because I was kind of curious that if you take into consideration like the median property prices and the association with the age of the people that can afford those houses and the age of their children, right? Because then, like a lot of the new houses here, a young couple with a kid probably, difficult to meet.
Right. And I think we'll see that being played out in things like the number of women of childbearing age that live in the district, how many births are happening in the district. We have I'll get to this in another slide, but I can mention it here. We have a data sharing agreement with Oregon Health Authority to get births, not just the total number within the district, but broken down by month and age of mother. So we can do things like align it with kindergarten classes and then understand how many women of childbearing age there are. So those population dynamics and also, sort of the soft socioeconomics of housing get worked into our forecast methodology. So right off the bat here, I have some of the total population trends for the district. So the district population has grown by more than 3,000 residents since 2000, and that's including growth of about 1,700 between the 2010 and 2020 censuses. And population and growth in Scott Mills and the unincorporated area has actually led to the district annual average growth rate increasing slightly in the 2010s. And that's despite a decline in the rate of population growth in Silverton. So you can kind of see third line item down, that's the district numbers, and we can see there was a 0.8% annual average growth rate from 2000 to 2010. That bumped up slightly to 0.9%. And if you look at the lines right below that for Scott Mills and Silverton and the unincorporated area, you can see how population, is still growing in the city of Silverton, but just not at the same rate as it was from 2000 to 2010. So a bit more interesting on this next slide is breaking down population trends into different age groups. So in this chart, we're looking at total population living in the district on the top line, and then broken down into those different age groups. So we can see that school age population, which is age 5 to 17, that grew by 193 between 2010 and 2020, and that's an average annual growth rate of 0.5%. And you can see that that's slower than the total population at 0.9% from 2010 to 2020 in the top right cell of that table. And in contrast to that age group, the population under age 5 actually decreased by 142 during that same period. So that's an annual average growth rate of negative 1.2%. And the last line on that table kind of sums it up, is the percent share of the population under age 18. So it was 30.4% in 2000, dropped to 26.7 in 2010, and then again to 24.7 in 2020. And I'd mention here that, that might kind of sound alarming, and it is in some ways. Like, we're seeing fewer children in your district, but we're seeing that across the state. So all the districts I've worked with, pretty much in Oregon and Washington, a few outliers, suburban districts that are still growing considerably. This has been a trend we've seen from this census data. So it is something to note and kind of keep in mind when we're thinking about the enrollment forecast going forward, because that's kind of why we're not seeing as much enrollment growth.
Is our downward trend, is that consistent with what you're seeing across the state, or are we less or more, if you could speak to that at all?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't have numbers in front of me, but just looking at this, that's pretty consistent with a lot of the districts I've worked with, especially in the Portland metro area, excluding like PPS. They're on a even steeper downward trend. But yeah, that's pretty consistent. I could always follow up with folks at the district and provide a few comparison districts, but just looking at those numbers, that's pretty comparable.
Thanks. Yeah, the generalization's sufficient for me. I'm just curious.
Okay, great. So yeah, real quick on this next slide, this is just looking at county and urban growth boundary population forecasts that come from the Portland State University Population Research Center. So I just wanted to point out here that Marion County is projected to add about 43,000 residents in the 20-year period from 2020 to 2040. And that's considerably less than the population growth of about 61,000 that occurred between 2000 and 2020. So their, county-wide population projection is just for population growth, but just slower than from 2000 to 2020. Okay, so here's that slide that talks about student generation rates or yields by the different types of housing. So as I mentioned, we looked at 2024 students by their residence, and we can then compare that to the housing that they're living in, whether it's single family or multifamily. We were able to break that down by market rate and income restricted. So what you can see here is for single family, for instance, there's 644 housing units built between 2014 and 2023. And then that next set of columns with the students, we have it broken down by grade group. If you look at the fourth one over K through 12, we have 324 students live in those 644 newly built single family homes. So then that gives us a student generation rate for K-12 of 0.503. So you can think of that as, quote unquote, half a student per housing unit. And then looking down, we see multifamily at 0.36. And then it's important to kind of note, you don't have a big sample size for income restricted or affordable housing, but there was one built, I can't remember, I reviewed this, it was kind of many years ago, maybe eight or so in this 10-year time period. There's only 20 of those units, but you can see how more students, and this is common for all income restricted and affordable housing, more students and families typically live in that housing, so it has a higher student generation rate. So I mentioned I could kind of look at these numbers and say if I felt like they were higher or lower or comparable to some of the other districts. I would say this is about on par for a district of your size and kind of the geographic location and the makeup of the housing stock. I have seen numbers for single family be higher for K-12. So instead of 0.5, we might be thinking upwards of 0.5 to 0.75. But that's pretty typical. The one thing I could, follow up on is potentially looking at if you guys had another company or did it yourselves in years prior, how that 0.5 number compares to historical, because the housing market's changing and homes are becoming more expensive. So then thinking about housing a little bit further, we reached out to the planning department and we're able to get some information on upcoming housing that's expected to be built. So we had information on 6 potential developments in the city, and this little chart is showing us which elementary school attendance area they're occurring in, the type, SF is single family, MF is multifamily, and then the total number of units. And it's not written in the table, but I do know that the final development in that table, Hacienda CDC, is an affordable or income restricted development. So just moving into that enrollment assessment portion, we look at your enrollment by grade, looking back for our analysis to 2018 through 2024 of October of last year. So we see in this chart the colors, the blue are the lowest for that particular cohort, or that grade, I should say, and the orange are the highest. So probably not a big surprise to you guys. 2018, you had your highest enrollment, just over 4,000. There was a dip, like there was for most districts in 2020 due to COVID. 2021 enrollment hit its lowest point in this time period, 3,535. And then you guys have been able to rebound slightly in the last 3 years, but not get back to that 2018 or 2019 level of enrollment.
Did you correlate this with the age of the children in the district? Trying to figure out if we've lost children or just less children? Like, are they going more to private schools? Are they doing more homeschooling?
Yeah, it's a bit hard to align that because of in and out migration. I think on the next, it's a couple slides, we'll see how births relate to kindergartners. So that's kind of a good indication of how many students you're capturing, especially at that level. So I'll just briefly mention this table is, looking at that historical enrollment, just broken down by school in a different way here, but the trends are the same. Enrollment was higher in 2018 and 19 than it has been at most schools since the pandemic, aside from Butte Creek that was able to stay pretty steady. Just want to briefly show this map because it just points to how we're looking at this geographically as well. So we took the 2024 students, geocoded the residents, and this map is looking at student density. Not a big surprise, you get most of your enrollment from the city of Silverton. But then you kind of see how it's spread out throughout the rest of the district and the unincorporated areas. And you do have a fair amount of enrollment living outside the district boundary. So this next slide just mentions kind of thinking of enrollment from 2 different perspectives. When I say enrollment, I'm thinking about the number of students that are enrolled with the district or at a particular school. That's including kids that live outside the district boundary. And And then you compare that to residents, and that's, the number of students that live in the district itself or within an attendance area. This chart is looking at district-wide transfer rates. So just a couple things I wanted to point out here is that you have a total of 449 students that live outside the district boundary that enroll with the district. That's about 12% of your enrollment, which I would say any district I look at that's 10% or more, that's kind of a higher amount of what we call out-of-district enrollment. So that's kind of an important component when we're looking at the enrollment forecast. So we do those kind of separately. We look at projecting enrollment for students that live in the district, but then also for the component of those that live outside the district, especially because that could be influenced by different policies of particular schools that receive a lot of those students from outside the district. And I know that's the case here. The other thing to point out is overall you have 542 students that reside in the district boundary. They live in a particular attendance area, but for any given reason, they attend a different school. We call that intra-district transfers. So that's kind of the middle column there. You see that 542. So that's an intra-district transfer rate of about 17%. And then in this next slide, I'll kind of illustrate what I mean by this. So we call this a residence attendance matrix. And if we look at the first line as an example, Butte Creek, there are 238 students that live inside Butte Creek's attendance area. And then one column over, there's 183 of those students actually attend Butte Creek. And then all the numbers to the right, starting with 3 at Central Howell, those are students that live in Butte Creek's attendance area, but for whatever reason enroll at those different schools. So if we summed all the numbers from 3 all the way over to 9 at Community Roots Charter, that's a total of 55 students that transfer out of Butte Creek's attendance area. So it's a capture rate of 77%, or the inverse is a transfer out rate of 23%. Now, if we look down the column for Butte Creek, we have the same 183 students that live in the attendance area and attend the school. But then we have students that live in other attendance areas like Central Howell, there's 4 of them, that live in that attendance area but transfer into Butte Creek. So then if we look down the column, we also see 35 students live outside the district boundary but enroll at Butte Creek. So that's a total of 121 students that transfer into Butte Creek, second to last row. That's a transfer in rate of about 40%. So this is just kind of an interesting perspective that maybe the district or the board didn't have on how kids are, enrolling at different schools, but live in different attendance areas, and also how many are enrolling from outside the district boundary.
Hey, Alex,
Yeah,
I've got a couple questions on this.
great.
So if we go back one slide, can you do that for me?
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to dig at this and find out what our out-of-district transfers are, like the students we're losing. And
Yeah.
it's not on here, I don't think.
No, that's kind of the hard part because we're contracting with you guys and we get your enrollment, but it would be hard to get all the other or statewide data set of sorts to understand how many students were or are living in Silver Falls School District and choosing to enroll elsewhere.
So, a couple things on this, like historically, we would net about a positive rate, about 150 kids between what we lose from ours versus those coming in.
Okay.
I would be curious to know that number, because for me, it shows the health of like, are we people leaving or people wanting to come here?
I can actually
Mhm.
answer that.
Yes.
The transfer in rate is much higher than the transfer out. So we have,
So
it's a
we're
positive,
We're still continuing that good trend.
yeah, and Heidi Everly can give you those figures.
So then the other one about the intra-district transfers, I feel like that would be interesting for you because we have such a unique setup here at Silver Falls School District with so many different schools for our size of our students.
Mm-hmm.
Did that 12.2% or no, the intra-district, I got 16%.
16%,
Do you
yep.
think that's pretty high for a school district? Or is that pretty average?
Let's see. I would say that that's pretty average. I see, I'm thinking of districts I've worked with or work with annually, like North Clackamas, and especially, yeah, Salem Kaiser. Yeah, that's pretty standard, especially with the setup that you guys have. I mean, having a couple, schools for Silverton, and then having the unincorporated area, and kids transferring around for different reasons. That's pretty average.
So then I guess my last one, looking at overall this and doing all the numbers, is what Dr. Cote down the table is mentioning. This, I think, from a scientific data-wise frame of mind, that birth rates are where you're going to have to focus. However, there's a significant, our enrollment is not 3683. We dropped all the way down to 3600 this year. So we lost an additional, well, we're at 3605 or 3608 right now, which has
Okay.
already passed your guys' projections. So we have had a couple startup schools pop up, online charter schools, homeschooling, private school in Mount Angel. You guys don't really capture that data as a reason why people are maybe leaving the district, I'm assuming, correct? Because it's pretty subjective.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard thing to predict what choices will be made. However, if I do, let's see, my next slide after this, we'll be talking about births, which I think if there's follow-up questions, it'll kind of get into that at the kindergarten level, because, that's kind of where the choice is typically made. Of course, kids can join at any other grade, but a lot of times when you start at kindergarten, you probably work your way through most of the grades. So why don't I move on to that, and if there's kind of further questions on that, we can circle back. Oh, I have one before births, and that's just I'll touch on methodology. We can always come back to this too at the end. I just want to make sure there's enough time to get through the forecast. But real quick on methodology, we kind of think about it in two models. One is the cohort component method. That's thinking about the broader components of population change, so birth rates, the population age structure, women of childbearing age, those things we talked about, like residential development. And then there's, at the same time, working into this model is grade progression ratios, which is very fundamental to how a lot of districts would do their own enrollment projections for a shorter term, maybe 1 to 2 years out. We're looking at how many students went from kindergarten to first grade, and you look at that over many years. You look at that grade progression ratio, maybe you're always gaining, 5 students from kindergarten to first grade. That's a grade progression ratio of 1.5. Those numbers, 1.05, those numbers can be used to help, form the basis of enrollment forecasts. So those are kind of the two main methods. So I could spend way too much time on this figure. It is kind of fundamental to getting to kindergarten enrollment. So this is looking at births that occurred in the district and then turned into kindergarten enrollment 5 or 6 years later. So I mentioned that we have a data sharing agreement with Oregon Health Authority. We get that birth data for births that occurred within the district. It's broken down by month, so we can align it to kindergarten cohorts. So for instance, if we looked at the far left, births that happened September to December 2012, and then January to August 2013, 244 births, that turned into 254 kindergartners in the 2018-19 school year. And then right below that 254 number is what we call a K to birth ratio, or the ratio to births, and that, just is simply 254 divided by 244 births, 1.04. So a lot of districts, including yours, I've seen numbers above 1, and that's when you have people moving into the district after they've had their child elsewhere. So, as mentioned, you guys are usually a net gainer of students because people are moving to the district after having their kid. Then we see though in 2020 and 2021 how that number goes below 1 to 0.88 and 0.87. That for many districts was indicative of the kindergartners not showing up in being enrolled in kindergarten, even though the births were there, right? The births already happened, but then COVID occurred, kindergartners didn't show up. And then for you guys, people maybe waited a little bit because they could, and then enrolled those students as kindergartners in 2022. So that's why we see it jump back up to a ratio of 1.09. And then you guys stay a little bit above 1 for 2023 and 2024. And this is something that is different than a lot of districts I've worked with. I've seen this dip happen for the COVID years, especially 2020 and 2021. But then for many districts, I haven't seen the ratio return to pre-pandemic levels. And that was presumably for, it's hard to pin down quantitatively, but that's likely because of more options, whether it be private or charter school, homeschool. Students aren't showing up at districts, even though the births were there, so they're going elsewhere. Just hard to understand exactly where. So for you guys, kind of fortunate, like you have returned to that ratio that's above 1. So you're still a net gainer of students due to in-migration. It's just now a little bit lower than it was. So there are, reasons people are choosing to enroll elsewhere, as you mentioned. One other thing to note on this, though, is you can kind of see how there were, roughly an average of births around 240 or a little bit above 240 from 2012 through 2016, 17. That number of births has gone down a little bit since then. The low point being 197 in 2020 to 2021, picked back up a little bit, but we've had 5 years now of being more in the 220 range rather than the 240 range. And looking at total population, if we think back and how the child population, especially under age 5, has been going down from 2010 to 2020 census, and total population is still kind of growing or being steady. We think, for our birth projections, that it's going to drop a little bit more to about, 215 range through the remainder of this forecast period out to 2028. So what that means is that even if you keep your ratio to births roughly the same, above 1, in our forecast, 1.01 to 1.04, you're still going to have kindergarten classes that are a little bit smaller than you're used to for our forecast. So I could pause there if there's any questions. All right. Moving on then to grade progression ratios. As I mentioned, these are looking at how many students are typically gained or lost when you're moving from one grade to the next over time. So if you see numbers that are above 1, it means that there were more first graders than there were kindergartners the prior year. Like 2018 to 2019 in the first column, 1.05, that's a gain of 5 students from the kindergarten class to the first grade class. And we look at that over time to get an average to help form the basis of the projections. And you can kind of see, we have just the 2018 to 19 year in the first column. A lot of grades transitions are above 1, meaning they gain a few students as they move through the grades. 2019-20, every number is below 1, which was expected in hindsight because of COVID. And then there's been a rebound since then, especially in 21 to 22. A lot of kids came back to the district, so to speak. And then they remained pretty steady in 2022 to 2023. And then 23 to 24, there's been some fluctuations per grade. So what we typically do, especially now that we're far enough away from the 2019 to 2020 year and the effects of COVID, we're typically looking at a 3-year average to help us base the future grade progression ratios. So the last 3 columns are GPRs that form the basis of the projections. And not a lot of surprises here, I guess, in comparison to other districts. You often see kindergarten to first grade be the highest, one of the highest GPRs, because kids are joining the district at first grade. And then 8th to 9th as well is always usually a big draw, especially depending on the high school and the programs that are offered and everything. You see a lot of students joining at 9th grade. And then, yeah, the ones that we see consistently a little bit below 1, that's also pretty typical for 10th to 11th and 11th to 12th. You guys actually have a little bit more retention from 11th to 12th grade than I see in other districts. There's usually a little bit more attrition, just dropouts and things like that, causing that, or different options too, graduating early or taking part in programs, getting ready for college. So on to the forecasts. Like I mentioned, we did a low, middle, and high scenario for the district-wide. Everything after this, we concentrate on the middle scenario. So here we have 2024 enrollment that we were based on in October, 3,683, remaining pretty flat through the 10-year forecast period. And that's because of the consistency we've kind of seen in the number of births, the number of how many births turn into kindergartners, and the stability of the GPRs. We also then break down that middle scenario forecast into grade groups. Only thing I could mention here is, the area grade group we're gonna see, some loss in the next few years, based on our projections, is K to 5, and that's just relating back to having expected smaller kindergarten classes than you've had in the last 10 years. So as those smaller birth cohorts become kindergartners, and then grades 1 through 5, that's gonna cause K through 5 enrollment to drop a little bit in the next 10 years. But then you also have some of those larger classes still moving their way through middle school and high school. So we see, kind of stability or a little bit of increase even in grades 9 through 12 for the first 5 years. And then as the smaller classes come through, or you stay a little flat then for 9 through 12 in the 5 to 10 year range. Just one more perspective for that middle scenario. This is broken down by individual grade and just kind of gives you a sense, based on the coloration. Darker colors are bigger cohorts, bigger numbers. Smaller numbers are, the lighter shades of green. So we expect, can highlight maybe 2026 kindergarten class. If I flipped back to the birth cohort, that's the low year from 2020. So that's a small birth cohort. Even if you keep your K to birth ratio at about 1, that's only turning into 204 kindergartners. And even with grade progression ratios that are slightly above 1, you're gaining kids as you move through the grades. It's still kind of not enough to make that, a large class. So we're expecting that to be kind of a lower one. And you see how they move through the grades and just cause enrollment to kind of be steady rather than going really up or down, because you have some of those larger classes leaving, the system, and being replaced by slightly smaller classes in future years. And then the last slide I have for you is the school level forecasts. So these are broken down by school, and then we included the first 5 years of the forecast, 2025 to 2029, and then the 10-year mark at 2034. And then you see on the far right column is the 10 years worth of change. So fairly, balanced for each of the schools. Like not one of them is losing a lot more than other, or vice versa. I guess Mark Twain is the only one that's gaining a bit of enrollment at that grade level. And then you see that all summed up at the bottom for the change. And yeah, just a reminder that this is based on October. So I know it was mentioned that you guys are, right now looking like the 2024 school year ended a little bit lower than October, which is to be expected. But hoping that, over the summer you guys are getting registration up. It's going to be interesting. We'll check in for sure when October 2025 enrollment becomes available so we can kind of compare our forecasts by school and by individual grade to kind of see how they performed. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
I have a question. Whenever they do surveys and statistical analysis, they always have a margin of error, an acceptable margin of error. Is that like your low to the high, the middle being kind of your prediction?
Yeah, with this type of work, you can't necessarily do specifically a statistical confidence interval, but I can say back on that slide that those low and high scenarios, we look at a few different things. To achieve those, we're looking at changing different parameters like the birth forecasts, the K to birth ratios, number of women of childbearing age, grade progression ratios. And then we're looking at, an analysis we've done of our accuracy for different districts over time. Typically, for a 1 year forecast, we're really hoping for error less than 1%. So when we're coming up with a kindergarten forecast for the low scenario, we're thinking, that usually can be more volatile because of how births become kindergartners and there's more choice happening there. So that might be more than 1% for kindergarten, but for other grades, it's roughly, 1% error. That gets all added up. So when you get to the 10-year mark, those low and highs are roughly 10% above and below the middle. So you could kind of think of it as a confidence interval of plus or minus 10% at the 10-year mark, which of course, we have the least confidence in because it's the farthest out. When we're looking at 1 year out, we're hoping to be, for district-wide especially, below 1% error.
Mr. Chair.
I'm good.
I don't have any additional questions.
Any additional?
No.
No, I don't have a question, just that's a great presentation.
I was gonna
There's
say-
so much data to process, and I'm a data nerd, and
You-
there's lots to look over and think about, so.
Filled in a lot of gaps, I think.
Yeah, no,
as
I
far
loved
as,
it. That's great.
The individual buildings and grades and things
Yeah.
like this of information we didn't know. One question I would have is, you do a lot of these, and
Mhm.
you touched on it earlier as far as, are there, what do I want to say? Would you say overall, the just overall picture that you got from this, like your slide there with our projected basically flat, is that the most common here in Western Oregon? And I'm going to restrict it to Western Oregon because it's a different kettle of fish when we get east of the mountains. So,
Sure.
so is that the norm? Are more districts more in the red area or more in the blue area? What's
I
your
would
take on that?
say, yeah, that's a great question. Well, and first, thank you for listening and interacting with the presentation. I appreciate that. It makes it more interesting for me. And there is, a whole report that I pulled these figures from. So if you guys take a look at it and you have questions, feel free to reach out. But that's a good question. Working with a lot of districts, in the region, Willamette Valley, west of the mountains, Portland metro area, I would say you guys are seeing your enrollment stay more stable in our projections than other districts. So you're faring a little bit better in terms of retention of enrollment despite statewide decline in birth rates.
Right.
And a lot of that has to do, I think, you're drawing in enrollment from out of district, roughly 12%. And as mentioned, that's higher than the number that are leaving your district. And just kind of some of the data points that I see that are helping you guys stay more stable is the kindergarten to birth ratio is a lot of those births are staying in the district. Or there's more showing up, like I said, transferring into the district. That's kind of the one thing that I can pick out from these numbers right now that are different from a lot of the districts I've seen where births are down. It's kind of like a double whammy, if you will, that you have not only are births down for most districts and just statewide, but on top of it, COVID and just created an environment where there's more choice happening in a lot of these districts, whether it's homeschool, private school. So a lot of those districts aren't seeing as many students show up. Even, there's lower births and the students aren't showing up as much in the public school districts as they were pre-COVID, whereas you guys seem to be able to retain them a little bit better.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question. Is there some data we could accumulate from the incoming kindergartners or even the first graders and second graders that would help you precise those predictions, like to where if we ask them, well, were you born in the district? Were you not born in the district? Or is there simple questions we can ask them on a volunteer basis or something like that to answer that would help you kind of refine your prediction?
I think if we think of the direction of like we know the births that are occurring in the district and how many end up as kindergartners, I think what your district staff are already seemingly tracking a bit is thinking about students that live in the district but are ending up not enrolling at Silver Falls. That's a thing that a district can do better than we can. And I'm not sure, a student or a family can answer that necessarily, but tracking that movement is definitely a data point that we would try to incorporate if we have, and not all districts necessarily are able to keep track of that as well. Especially I know when it's moving out of state. I know if it's in the state, my understanding is, there's a little bit better tracking of where they're going. But that's something that I would continue to keep an eye on. And one other thing is, just districts can keep track of their student residences so that we can understand how many students are living in the district versus how many live outside the district and transfer in. So all those kind of things together, but not a lot of questions come to mind for family specifically, just, kind of data tracking on the district side.
Yeah, I have a question. So back to the in-migration topic in the line, and we were actually above 1. So we were getting more coming in than going out. What would our enrollment look like without that in-migration net? I mean, would we be, it makes it sound we're a desirable district and people aren't moving here with their kids. They're still out of district and they're moving their kids here. They're not moving physically here. Is that what I hear you say?
Can you repeat that last part, please?
So is the in-migration from families moving to within the district boundaries with their kids, or is it from people from out of district moving their kids, transporting them daily into the district?
It could be both. Yeah, the number, having a birth decay ratio above 1 is a mixture of literal in-migration where people are moving physically to a new house inside the district, but it's also students that were born outside the district, don't live in the district currently, but enroll in Silver Falls.
Yeah, I guess I guess that's something probably for us to tease out a little bit more, because it would, to me, that we want to be a community where families can locate and have their kids, and it kind of might give us a false sense of security that we are. It's like our enrollment is staying the same or going up a little bit because of those people physically transporting their kids here, and not, it's a comment among people I've heard that it's hard to buy a house and raise a family here.
Or it's
Right.
So
it's
that's
a
just,
right.
good
that,
marketing plan for us to increase our population.
yeah.
Well, Alex, you
Yeah,
touched on this, I
absolutely.
think. You said there was like 449 that live outside the district.
Right.
So 12% that we're getting on the positive, was that accurate?
That's the right number, and that's kind of the thing that the district, staff can keep an eye on is, next year, if we look historically, I don't have the numbers in front of me. We have historic numbers from 2018, for what we looked at. And, if you, looking at the trends of that number, the 12% that live outside the district, and if that kept growing, because you're attracting more kids, that might be great, but at the same time, you'd have to be cognizant of like if that went away suddenly because of different policies, that would be a detriment to the enrollment. Versus you'd also want to think about students living in the district, make sure that's being stable too.
Right.
I find these numbers extremely helpful, Alex. Thank you. My last question for you, just an odd one. We have like, we'll say 21,000 people in our district. I think close around that, maybe 22 now. I don't know what the census is. The number that I have for you, a question is, we are capturing, according to your chart, 3,683 kids. But that's not how many kids reside in our school district. My question, like when I looked it up, I think they said there was estimated on the census data, like 24.5% of the population is of 5 to 17 years old. Does that sound about right to you, about that, like a quarter?
Yeah,
that?
I just flipped back to this. So as of 2020 census, 5 to 17-year-olds, there was 4,057
Okay,
residents in that age group. Yep.
okay. Because I'm just like, it would be just, as a health of the district, how many of those are we capturing? Why are we not capturing them? It's just a good thing for me as a board member to think about.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, thank you. That's the number I was looking for.
Great.
Okay, there's no further questions. Thank you for your time, Alex.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate the data, most definitely.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank
Have
you.
a great rest of your meeting.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I have two real quick side questions for the finance department. And I apologize for my ignorance. Funding for a transfer student compared to an in-district student, is there any difference?
No, no
It's the
difference.
same? Okay.
The only difference would be if they were weighted for a special category like special education or EL or any of those
Yeah,
things.
yeah, but it's consistent.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question is transport cost of intra-district transfer. Do we defer that, or are the parents on their own? So my kid, I live on South Third here, and I decide to send my kid to Silvercrest.
Yeah,
Is
they
it my
transport
responsibility?
their own kids.
Yes.
Although there's a couple bus stops where they can hop on to go other places.
Okay.
So we accommodate them a little bit, but
Mhm.
they are basically in charge of that.
Thank you.
That is
Answers
a
my
good
question.
question.
And all out-of-district transfers, they come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, they bring their own in.
Yeah, there's zero transportation costs for the out-of-district kids.
Are they still doing because when we had moved out of Victor Point, went out to Abaquah, we were getting Kaylee, they had a bus pickup at Robert Frost to go up to Victor Point. Do those still operate? Because Scotts Mills had one there too.
I would have to ask Heather right now, because Heather just redid all the bus routes,
Okay.
so I'm.
have-
Oh, that's how it works?
Oh, Kevin's here, is it still good? Okay, thanks, Kevin.
Because I mean, like, that was, but you're right, there is an additional cost
Yeah.
there. But it seemed like it would be, because they made the parents drive the kids to that central location rather than have the bus
Right.
go to their house.
Yeah.
I don't know what's additional cost, because the bus has to go that direction anyway.
Bus is going that
The
way.
bus is
anyway,
on the way.
so they're
and
just
these are
hopping.
buses that are going
Yeah.
that way anyway, we
Yeah.
just,
Perfect.
somebody letting them
Yeah, good
get
point.
on there.
It's a meeting point.
Okay. Okay, superintendent's report, Kim.
Okay. Here we go. I kept this kind of short because we had that Flo Analytics presentation, so I'll be brief this evening, which I'm not usually. So we're going to talk about our new principal, James Rise. We're going to give you a quick professional development update, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the structure of work sessions coming up. So James Rise is back. This is so exciting. James used to work in the district. He was an assistant principal and an AD at the high school for, I don't know, like 6 or 8 years. And then he went to Cascade for a bit, and we have hired him back to run Central Howell and Prattle. And he's a super high quality guy, and we're really excited about him.
Can I interrupt just for a second on that?
Yep, you absolutely can, Walt.
I had a board member from Cascade approach me and was very upset about this.
Oh, yeah.
I think they got a good catch.
And I'm a little worried about when I see Darren Drill. I'm not sure how that's going to go. We did try to be kind to Cascade, and we let James. You know, he is still working in their district, trying to tie up some loose ends. So we didn't want to leave Cascade hanging. So he will report to the district on the 14th officially. So he's kind of doing double duty right now, which is not easy, but he's handling it like a champ. Let's see, I did all those. He originally came to Silverton in 2014 as a teacher and a head baseball coach, so he's got some sports experience. He played collegiate baseball in Texas or coached collegiate in Texas and California. He has his undergrad from Western and a master's in education from Pacific. And he does admin license work at Concordia. He's got kids in the district, which is really cool for him. He's got middle school kids, and he's really excited about being able to be around his kids while they're in school. His wife and he like to travel a bit, and they like the outdoors. And so he's really looking forward to continuing to build on the great communities of Central Howell and Prattle, and he's excited about fall. So we're really lucky to get him in the mix, and I was really excited about this one, so happy to share that news with you. Professional development. So I've been doing my other job a little bit this summer. So this has been this is a lot of curriculum director work. August 8th, we did a full training for administrators on first aid, CPR, Narcan, and life-saving measures. All administrators took that, except me, because I was dealing with an ODE thing. But I am first aid and CPR trained already, and Narcan trained. So Marissa lined that up for our administrators. It's really good since you have several new building leaders in different buildings to make sure everyone is on board with that training. U-Fly training for K-2 staff for new curriculum for that support system for our language arts curriculum. That will happen on August 26th. On August 27th, 3-5 teachers will take the 95% ELA training. On August 27th, we have sexual misconduct training by PACE. It's just a 1-hour training. And then on September 24th, we will have K-5 iReady math training. And so we have adopted curriculum in the district that we've never done any training on. iReady is one of those. And that, in my opinion, as a former curriculum director and, well, your current curriculum person, I think that's a great tragedy not to give teachers training on products and tools that they're going to use. So we're trying to get some of those in, and I've been using a bit of the Title. We're going to have a little bit of Title I funding that's extra, and I use that to pay for some of that. Grades 6 through 12, we haven't totally mapped this out, but they're going to do some training on constructing meaning or multi-tiered systems of support on September 24th. And then when I went to Rotary today, I'm going to throw this in real quick because I was pretty excited about it. There were a couple of people there talking about Wise Mind, and this is a system that's used a little bit in Salem-Kaiser, and we used it at Butte Creek last year and at the high school, and it is it's training for students on understanding your brain and how it works. Your limbic system, part of your brain versus your frontal cortex, and what happens when you're upset, how your frontal cortex doesn't work very good, which I would attest to from the swatting event when I came in here. Anyway, just teaching kids how to deal and how to manage their own emotions better, and working through strategies for kids for when you feel like that. So that was a really interesting discussion at Rotary. I am going to talk to them a bit more about maybe doing some training for teachers and administrators. I think it's really essential. We didn't do a lot of this last year because we were kind of unsure about budgetary things, and we were kind of just trying to gather ourselves and heal a little bit. But it's, the teachers are asking for this training, so I'm really excited to be able to give you that update.
Hey, Kim, what is
Yeah.
the constructing meaning? What is that?
Constructing meaning is it's a system for EL students that, or for English language students, that is really best practice for all teachers. And it really, well, Sarah probably could tell us. She probably knows what it is. And it just gives you better strategies to reach more students with higher engagement and better differentiation, so that you can reach all the students in your classroom and give them the correct support they need to be successful. So for instance, when I was an English teacher, if I had students that were struggling a little bit with an essay, sometimes I would give them an outline with sentence frames in it, and it would just be sentence starters. So when they couldn't get started, I'd say, well, what about this? And I would write out a sentence frame thing for them, or sometimes I had them pre-made. It just gives them a little bit, more support, so that they can get moving and get going with what they're trying to accomplish. That's kind of the short version. I can send you some more information if you're interested. And Melissa Linder's actually trained in this, so that's really kind of a cool thing for the district. So that one will not cost a lot of money. Any other questions? Okay, so we're gonna have a little. We want to do a little different format, and I talked to Phil and Derek about this at our last agenda setting session. I think that our work sessions, to get more building information for you all, like you guys are always just here, but I think it's good for you to tour buildings and see students in action, see administrators in action. And so we're going to try a new format where we actually meet in a building during the work session, and we tour the building. We talk about the facilities assessments we've had for that building, so you can kind of see what you need to see about the building. And it's an educational journey, and really inviting the communities for those schools in on those evenings to really talk about what needs to happen inside their school for improvements. So for instance, tonight the air conditioning was out in the high school, and they scrambled over here, Jeff and Vance and who knows, and got it back on for us. But we have a 30-year-old chiller in this building. And I want you to let it sink in for a second that this building would have been 100 degrees if you were sitting here, had that not gone back on about 4 o'clock. So having the information and understanding some of the challenges we face, because if the chiller had truly gone out all the way, that is at least a $500,000 repair. It's $500,000 to $1 million, Jeff tells me, to replace that air conditioning unit. And the air conditioning unit is a bit undersized for the high school anyway, because when they did the second phase of the bond, they didn't upgrade or increase the size of the unit, and so it really is kind of undersized for the building. So it's those types of things, and helping our public understand some of the challenges we face budget-wise that are related to that facility, and what they can do, as parents and partners to help us make that building better and to take good care of it, and just all of, and to see the great work that their kids and teachers are doing.
This was included in the analysis that we had last month of all the facilities, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in there. Yeah. And so, I've had a 30-year-old house before. You know what happens when your house turns 30, like hot water tank starts to go
It
out.
actually starts about 10.
The
in my
element in the
experience.
oven doesn't work. I mean, that's kind of
My
a
house is
thing.
125 years old, so.
Yeah, right. Well, you
Yeah.
get to replace everything.
Hey, Kim, I really love this idea, and it's a blast from the past, because I think the board used to do this quite a bit. I only have an operational question. We're supposed to record these. Are we going to be able to record them pretty easily?
Yeah,
Okay.
we will. I haven't talked to Daniel about this. Surprise, Daniel. Debbie did. Good job, Debbie. I think
Okay.
we can manage it.
Okay.
It's a little complicated, but we did this when Andy was superintendent when I worked in Dallas, and it was really cool because sometimes the schools would showcase different things, and sometimes they'd have things up on the walls for you all to look at, and I think it's just good for you to get into buildings, and some of you are really busy. So if we meet in a building, then you get to see that building and really
Good way to help us
experience.
connect to
Yep.
the school communities.
Yeah. And And one more thing, I wanted to tell you that Kinder Jumpstart's been going on, and they're hilarious. They're so funny. Those kindergarten kids are, and they're having the best time. And I went in last week, and the teacher was singing a song to them and teaching them their colors during the song, and they were all excited for apple snack afterwards. So that ODE grant that we got enabled us to give those kids a really great experience. They were able to go to the pool last Friday if they wanted to. They can go again this Friday if they want to. And that was for free for families. And so that was a very cool program that was grant funded from the Oregon Department of Education. So it was a lot to pull it off in that short time period. It was very short. But it was a cool opportunity for kids, and the high school kids have done a great job recovering a lot of credit during their summer experience. And so we'll have a full report on that once they tabulate it all up. Questions?
No, just a comment. Those types of things are just great for helping to level the field for those students. And,
Yeah.
And so that they not always, or start out behind the 8 ball that way.
Yeah.
Don't start out behind the
Yeah, people are so kind in Silverton. So we had 34 kids sign up, and we had, we tried to really market it to kids that hadn't had any type of preschool or that kind of experience. And we had a couple teachers that had kids that were signed up, and they're like, we could pull our kid out if you need extra room. And I just thought that was really nice. Like, we have really nice people that work here, and so but all the kids got to go, so it was a great experience.
Do we have an update on the construction projects that you showed us last month?
Yeah, that is right on track, right on schedule. The roof's on, the siding's on. They're working on interior things now. I probably will head up there tomorrow to take a peek at it, or Thursday, and it looks great. Jeff said it's right on track. Yeah, it should be done. It's supposed to be done on the 22nd. Wow, that's next week, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
All
working
going
on it.
quickly.
Yeah, they're on the inside now, so that's good.
That's quite an accomplishment to finish a building project on time in a public establishment. Whoever is pushing the button, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Jeff has done a very good job working with them, and the contractor that has that contract is really, really professional. I'm really impressed. So I would definitely use them again. I think it's all.
Okay, Tom, financial report.
Kim's last slide, I mentioned a budget boot camp. I actually referred to it as
Oh, I'm sorry.
budget camps. I was thinking like I'd have a folk guitar, we'd be around the campfire, and it would be kind of more casual, but we can make it a little more of an intense boot camp.
Yeah, that is at the
On
next
some of
first
the things.
session.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I'm
Tom.
reserving all my questions for that.
That's right. I don't really have too much of an update since the last couple of weeks ago. We continue to work on the end of year cleanup, which is a long process. We're still closing the books, balancing the funds, and now starting to prepare for the upcoming audit. For the general fund, though, there is a little bit of change. We have found about $60,000 in additional revenue that has been updated and added to the general fund for expenditures. We are now showing about $130,000 less than we did 2 weeks ago. That gives us a net of almost $200,000. So for the general fund, I mentioned a couple weeks ago, the projection was a fund balance of about $2.9 million. It's now looking like about $3.1 million. Or in terms of percentage, an ending fund balance of just about 5.9% of the total general fund operating revenues. And you might remember when we kind of started to discuss reserves as a concept and a potential policy, OASPO recommended a ending fund balance, kind of that range between 4 and 8% as just a generic recommendation. So the 5.9 now is kind of in the middle of that, which feels a lot healthier probably than a year ago and kind of much more on track. So that's really the main update. I did want to mention, because kind of keep it timely whenever questions come up, Mr. Cote at the last board meeting was asking about account 1920, and I actually didn't know that much about it, so he did a dig. And it kind of gets confusing because the verbiage, which comes from the Oregon Department of Education, is donations from private sources. When the district receives large donations, somebody from the community makes a donation for a new sports field or to pay for a teacher, for example, those all go into a special fund which is for specific purposes. That fund also has student accounts at each school, athletic accounts, booster kind of accounts. So I'll cover that too when we go kind of through the budget fund by fund. 1920, however, which has a total revenue of about $300 a month, so it's a very small amount, usually gets very small donations that are just district-wide. The district wants to put on an all-staff breakfast, and a local bank or insurance company wants to write a check to cover that. That's where we would deposit those funds.
We just had that happen.
Which we just had happen. And we get a little bit of money, I guess we get some small royalty checks from our district logo being used by another school. There's a way that schools can kind of borrow as a template your art logo, and we get like $30 a month or something still coming in from that, which is kind of fun. So hopefully that answers your question. That's how
It does, actually.
that's used.
Okay. One less for the work session.
And just a reminder for kind of the budget camp, if there is something you're curious about and would like to see, or like a trend, how has this changed or something like that, send those to Debbie, and I'll try to fold the slide to answer each of those. That's really my update.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Sure.
I do have a question on the financial report.
What's that?
I have a question real quick, Phil.
Oh, okay.
That FEMA money, I don't see it as for an end of year. Wasn't it like 300,000 we finally got? Where did we put that?
Yeah, it would have, I believe that the FEMA money had to go on to another year, correct, Tom?
Let me try to
Because
see.
it was shown as a resource on a different year, Josh.
Yeah, because I know we had budgeted for like 2 years ago, but then it never got put here, but I know that we got it, and I'm just
Yeah, we
wondering why.
did get it.
It wouldn't be listed on here as like an addition to the year and under that account, but.
No, because it just canceled out a negative
Well, I was gonna
number.
say, wouldn't it have been involved in that transfer business to zero out those past accounts?
Oh, the 600,000, yeah, maybe.
It was actualized before it actually was received.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah,
So-
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it will show, I mean, it was, it's technically a revenue under another year, I
Okay.
believe.
I'll have to get back to you.
Yeah, Tom could check, we'll check for you. We can send an email.
Yeah, just email them, it's fine. All right, that's the only one I had.
Okay, Tony, staffing.
All right, thank you, everybody. Glad to be here with you this evening and talk a little bit about the activities we've been doing in human resources since last spring. It's always the busiest time of the year for us, and not only are we kept on our toes, but we also are engaged with a lot of employees individually, whether it's through hiring, transfers, and then also people are doing their planning. So a lot of stuff with benefit questions and whatnot. So we're pleased to offer you this update today. So in the spring, Marissa Franklin, who's our personnel specialist, you've heard Kim mention Marissa, and Marissa took on the role of personnel specialist before. There was a separate personnel specialist, so this was back before I got here. And then Marissa did part-time work in the HR area and then part-time in business. One of the reductions that we had a year ago was to move Marissa entirely to the HR area, but we don't have that other position. So really our HR department right now is myself, and I also do policy work, and then Marissa, who does the lion's share of all the day-to-day processing work. So that gives you a little context when you hear about the numbers that we're working with here. But in the springtime, Marissa and I went to each school to review the current and projected staffing. The charge that we had at the time was to, one, always keep in mind student learning, but also an important charge that we've heard from the board before, which is also do whatever we can to avoid reverting to the same staffing practices that contributed to the financial challenges we had. We've already talked about the alligator chart, the difference with enrollment and staffing. So that was very much forefront in our mind when you have your staffing be such a high percentage of your overall budget. And a way to look at it would be in what we call staffing models. So in the previous administrations, and oftentimes just by culture, it was often did what we call staffing by people which means when we think about going to a building and talking about what we look at next year, you will hear the discussions are solely based on, well, I have this person doing this, and I have this teacher doing that, and this happening there. And that is a model, and I think a lot of people will think of it, well, that's a people-friendly model. I will actually say that's not a people-friendly model, because it really thinks of people more as you know, a reason to think about how I get my building set up. When really the way you should be looking at staffing models is more what we call staffing by position, which really gets back down to you analyze your building by needs. Where are your enrollment trends going? You know, what are your specialties that you have that you're going to need for subject matter expertise or whatnot? Because even at the elementary level, and Kim and I had some conversations the last few days with principals about, with enrollment number changes, what is the right type of person with an endorsement in a building, particularly the K-8s, for instance. So what I want to do is really work on the staffing by position, or what we call a position control model, which is half business department, half HR department. So that was the philosophy that we went into when we were looking at our staffing. So when you do that kind of a staffing by position, a focus really becomes enrollment. And what that means with us is that we need to keep on top of and be ready to make adjustments to staffing prior to the year, and if need be, I don't like doing it, but at the what we call the 10-day mark, the 10-day enrollment piece. And in my long career of doing this, I've had to, over the career, probably make about 4, maybe 5 of those switches at day 10. So if you do your work up front, you don't have to do a lot. Sometimes you need to, especially as resources get tight. So with that being said, we want to give you guys an update of what's been happening lately. So since June 1st, we've had 67 total jobs posted. And think of this in terms of the district, that's just under 500 employees, okay? So that's still a fair amount. Now, it doesn't mean all that people resigned or terminated and left. There could be things as transfers, adjustments in FTE and whatnot, but we did have 67 total postings because we still consider a posting. Of those postings, you see we had 3 administrators, Kim's mentioned them. We had 22 licensed, 18 classified employees, and 24 other employees. A lot of those are coaches. I can go into more details if you want on any of those, but it's a pretty even spread. So for the licensed, for instance, 2 of those were counselors, 20 of them were teachers. On classified, 10 of them were instructional assistant positions, and another 4 were office positions. The other big piece to the other number is summer work, because it was really late in the game, as Kim mentioned, that we got the summer grant. So that was alone 18 people right there that we needed to get signed up. And we needed that within about, what, 2 weeks time at best, right? So,
Yeah, phone interviews. And,
yeah. So that's the number of postings we had. If we start looking then at what we've done is in terms of filling all those positions, 61 of them have been filled to date. So this is a little bit update even from what we had posted on Friday, because I got fresh numbers this morning. So within those, the 3 administrators have all been filled, 24 licensed were filled, 11 classified, 23 other. So you can see the bulk of the positions we had posted have been filled. So where does that leave us? Where that leaves us today is that we still have about 11 active postings overall. Now you see, those numbers might not add up totally because the posting number may have included some, or the hiring number may have included some positions that were actually posted a little bit before June 1st. So the number, don't use it as a math number to add up. It's more like an overall picture of staffing. So you can see that we still have 1 teaching position to fill, 6 classified, and then 4 other, which are a lot of extra duty type positions, coaches and whatnot. We've also in the meantime started, we've worked with the athletic director to establish what's called a coaching assistant position. And that kind of ties into what Tom had mentioned, where we do get interest from community groups, boosters and whatnot, and trying to also support our athletic programs. But nonetheless, when you want to do that, you still have to have a protocol, especially in the area when you're talking about people, right? Because we need to think about pay equity is a big one. And then, of course, you need to make sure you have a consistent process about how you're vetting people, and then making sure that people are getting all the work they need to get done, training, background checks, and everything. So that has been implemented in the last, like, 3.5 weeks now. So lots been happening in the area in terms of the workload we've done during the summer, which now leads us into really, I get to bring you and present to you the real nuts and bolts side of, you had that nice about 50-minute or so presentation on the enrollment projections. Well, in my office, I have to make that stuff the reality. So I wanted to explain to you a little bit about how I go about doing that. And this is particular, again, looking at it more from a model by staffing by position, which is not necessarily always, again, what's been done in the past. So some of this required some education, even for us here at the district. So if you look at the first step of this is you're monitoring enrollment. So you can see here that we looked at what was the enrollment at our schools as of the beginning of this last school year, and then what was the enrollment number as it is currently. There's another line that I had which is not on this chart, because this chart is looking at static from today to this time last year, but I also have the enrollment numbers at the time Marissa and I staffed the buildings in the spring. So a way to look at it would be the three numbers we have is we have the beginning of last year, the staffing time of last year, which would be toward the end of the year, and then where we're trending right now. And those are the two, the bookends of those important numbers. So you can see from these numbers how you can see Butte Creek, for instance, is actually the one school that is up, moving from 282 to 309, but you can also see that there's several of our buildings are down. Evergreen is down, Mark Twain is down, Scotts Mills is down fairly significantly relative to the overall number of enrollment. Silvercrest I'm watching very, very carefully, and even Victor Point is a little bit down now. Mark Twain. When I worked with Heidi in looking at these numbers, because we still have a few weeks until the school year starts. So we are also considering what happens in these last few weeks. Well, I think if we did a quick like Jeopardy question, you would say that the number one answer most people would come up, well, we're likely to get more kindergartners. Because oftentimes the kindergartners, if you're a new family coming in, you might not know to enroll your kids until the week before school starts, right? But we still use historical information. So 2 weeks ago, I was a little more panicked when Heidi told me we were looking at about 150 students down from where we would have been at the beginning of like the last year. However, knowing that there's some of that adjustment, my historical experience tells me of those 150 students down, that we would probably get about at least 50 of them coming in. So which tells me when I'm doing staffing that I need to think, okay, I might be on the net overall staffed over by about 3 teachers. If you start doing some math, right, and real basic math. So I start right away, start doing my process of looking at how does enrollment look at the schools compared to the staffing. So what we do when we do that is we do what we call staffing ratios. So what I looked at were the number of teachers that Marissa and I staffed at each building. So you can see, for instance, at Central how we staffed 6 teachers, and they still have at this point 6 teachers. So you'll see that really the numbers here, with the exception of one building, and this was as of last week, pretty much with the same numbers. Now I'm going to give you recommendations tonight that will change that in the next few days. And when we do the ratios, though, it's important to think about what do you consider when you're doing a class size ratio. Well, a common practice, and even the state does this, is that you generally look at the ratios in terms of what you would call your general grade level classroom setting. Okay, so you're thinking the average 3rd grade teacher, what's the number of students that they're averaging in their classes? So that means you take out of the consideration some of what we call the very specialized programs. So not all of our special ed programs, because our LRC program, for instance, which just about all the elementaries will have some number of students in there. They're primarily, but they used to use the term mainstream. I know some people still use it really in the world of equity. You don't talk about the word mainstreaming as much anymore, but it basically means to what degree are those students still getting services in the primary classroom. The LRC program, the great majority of the day, if not even all of the day, they are receiving their instruction in that program. So I don't reduce those numbers from the enrollment, overall net enrollment, but I do reduce the numbers from our structured learning program, our basic skills program, and our functional skills program. And we have 3 of those programs. So like Butte Creek, for instance, has the structured learning program. That's 20 students. Mark Twain has basic skills, and Robert Frost has the functional skills. So it's not a coincidence that the larger schools tend to have those programs.
But to my understanding, like, you've excluded those SLP kids from the numbers, but some of those kids are getting mainlined into the classroom.
Oh, they
So-
may, they indeed may get some degree of service in the classroom, but.
So,
I
but that
work
means
with-
that teacher is gonna be putting a little more, I mean, that number for the ratio is not exactly accurate to, so I mean, some of those kids are gonna take, you know, let's be honest, some of them are just harder to manage.
Yes,
As they're
and
learning
any-
to get back into gen ed.
And any ratio
Yeah.
is gonna be based on assumption points.
Okay.
And that's why I'm explaining to you the assumption points you use going into this. It is, again, the same assumption points that ODE uses when they do their numbers.
They do the same
And-
thing.
Yeah, and in talking with Brandon, you know, my question was, and you have to use some threshold. So the threshold I was using in this iteration, and we can always recalculate the numbers based on anything, it's a formula, right? Was, are they receiving 50% or more of their instruction in the setting? And it was those three programs that we said on the average, they're not. Plus, if you were to include those numbers in the enrollment ratios, then it would also be reasonable to include those staff in those ratios, right? So when you see the number of teachers in there, that doesn't include that those programs also have staffing. So for instance, at the buildings, you can see that they may have various number of ELD teachers and intervention teachers or teachers in the specialized program. So here's the two adjustments that are made. Is that in the enrollment line, so when you see that 309 for Butte Creek, before I do the ratio, I reduced the 20 students who are in the SLP program. So when I did my math, and that's really measuring it at 20 students less. So it's not, 309, it'd be closer to, 89, right? But then the teachers too don't include that he has a few teachers that are doing that specialized program, and there's one intervention teacher. At Butte Creek, they had a 1.0 intervention and 0.6 time of English language development. So I also don't calculate that in the enrollment. So the 11 number that you see there, that does not include those intervention teachers, okay? Which again, you're right, Josh, if we include those in the ratios, then we have to go back and recalculate all those factors that go into it. So again, it's a number based on a formula.
It will be hard because you don't always know which students are gonna be able to be reintegrated.
And they fluctuate through
Yeah.
time. By
Well,
the end of the
yeah.
school year, you will see that more of those students will hopefully be getting services in the classroom, okay? So when you do that ratio, what I did is I did the math on that, and you can see those in the ratio column. So that's the adjusted ratio numbers. And what I was looking at, and when you look at the color coding there, I'm looking at an average class size of about 25. We have an MOU with the union this year that looks at the K1 area being about, the target being about 24, 26 for our 2-3, about 28 for the other elementary grades, and then goes to 30 for self-contained 6 to 8. Then you go on from there. And high school level, for instance, it's more based on overall net number of students you have in the whole day. So it's overall number of students you see across the different periods. So I used, again, and it's an assumption, right? So the target I used in this analysis was about 25 students. And in looking at that, so that's why you would see, if 25 is my target, that's why you see that the closer you're to 25, the closer you get to a dark green. The lighter green, the lighter the green color is, means the smaller your class sizes on average are getting. The more you start getting toward the red, means that the more you're getting to a larger class size. So in doing that math, you can see that as of 8/4, so August 4th, you can see where Butte Creek had in that adjusted ratio about 26.3 students. You can see though that a lot of our schools had a lower ratio. And those numbers, it's not coincidental that they line up with that very same enrollment report that we looked at. And you can see, so for instance, what I have to do in my world then is start thinking that at some point those ratios become they have an impact on staffing, which means ultimately they're going to have an impact on dollars and cents. Because we get about $11,000 or so per student, so you do that math. When I do this ratio though, now in my world what I do is I start looking at where would be the appropriate areas to adjust, if I need to adjust. Well, one of them that I made right away was with Scotts Mills, because that school saw a significant drop. 35 students. So when I go about it, I look at that, okay, but that number of students have dropped, and even if I saw a reasonable number of those students come back into the mix, would it still be so low enough? So otherwise saying, would that number need to go up so much that it wouldn't make sense to do an adjustment? So with that number, they would have to gain it within that period of time, they would have to gain another about 20 to 25 students for it to make sense, to not make the adjustment. So last week, there was a .75 opening that was at the middle grades level at the school. That was a science teacher. I left that position vacant. And then, therefore, though, the principal had to relook at how they shuffled the grade levels. Okay? Again, remember, this isn't saying necessarily that this is a best instructional practice. It's one factor you look at it when you make these decisions.
It's a right sizing.
Yes,
You're right sizing your staffing to match your enrollment. And if you don't do that, then you're out of balance, which we were in the past.
So here,
So-
go ahead, sir, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Or-
Go ahead.
I'm older.
Yeah.
I'll go first. So my question though is student experience, right? So this gives me an average. It doesn't give me an enrollment by class, right? So when I look at this, and I'm assuming you're leading into, you're gonna ask us to make some kind of decision here, is like, okay, so evergreen, right? So you're going from 3 to 2 here in this, and I understand the ratio. I totally understand the business side of this. Does that mean that we're going to have a kindergarten to 4th grade teacher and a 5th grade through 8th grade teacher, and they're going to have to manage all those different curriculums in the same class?
I'm going to explain that a little
Okay,
bit
all
more,
right.
and that's what becomes part of
Okay.
the challenge
Yes,
of
okay.
of doing staffing, particularly in our district.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
But again, so not all of these things are being things that I would recommend, because you can see in some cases, like for instance, Evergreen, you're right. Well, while a pure formula would say that 20.7 kids is very small, okay, but if I dared move it down to 2 teachers instead of 3, well, you're right, how would you divvy up those 2 teachers amongst 8 grade levels, right? And there's only a few things you can do, right? There would be, yes, you would either be teaching 4 grades each, or you have to look at other ways of addressing the difference, which could be, you heard about transfers, right? Many districts, what they do is they look at where their in-district transfers are coming from, and there are many districts where they'll actually tell the people who are coming in, that say, when you come in on an in-district transfer, this year we can give you your choice number 1 school, but it's always, it may be to make staffing work on average, right size it district-wide, that it may be in a year 2 or year 3, it may be that you have to get your 2nd or 3rd choice, right? Another thing you have to look at too is, and yes, ultimately, I think where ultimately and this is again, please don't come after the messenger, but it's just the way of the business. Ultimately, yes, there's a point where you go through all the iterations of what you may possibly do, and then you realize from an economic standpoint, yes, there becomes a point where, is it economically viable to keep a school open? Now, remember I mentioned that's one part of the equation. That's just one part of the equation.
Now, you do know that that's a question that's been around here for many, many, many years.
We know.
And I think that, I'm hoping that this group can actually put their work where their mouth was during the campaign or previously, and actually do like this report that we got earlier, that's very precious for this kind of analysis. Plus the report that we had last month on the status of the buildings, and actually put some kind of a ad hoc committee here and do a real analysis and come out with some solution of variances where, everything's possible, from taking a school that maybe is a little too small and make it bigger and consolidate to, there's so many different variants that we can do that are not as drastic as closing things and everything and so on. Not all or nothing, but that's good. I
There's a
appreciate
lot of
that.
range in between.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking us to the
Yeah.
process.
But see, if you don't do this part of it up
Yeah.
front, then you don't have a good place to start those discussions.
I do have a
Because
specific-
then you get a lot of different inroads, right, into the conversation, where you want to have at least a starting point.
I do have a specific question about Evergreen. They used to have quite a long waiting list to get into that school. Has that changed?
Right now, what we're seeing is a lot more of the waiting, what we would call the waiting list, whether it's transfers. Again, I'm not seeing anyway. I mean, I can't speak to a long term of the history, delving into that depth of it, but I'm not seeing a long waiting list in terms of people who are within the district wanting to get in. And when we see it from out of district, the school where we're seeing the greatest desire, interest is Prattam, where I think
Yeah,
Kim,
for
we're
out
about
of
almost
district.
40% or so.
No, higher.
even.
Well,
It's
where-
in the report that you just
Well, it's,
got, yeah.
by geography, it's closer to Salem.
Yes,
Yeah.
we get a lot of
Well,
Salem
yeah.
Kaiser kids who want to come.
And by
into
history,
Prattam.
that building,
And then,
before it ever became part of this district, that's
Yeah.
the way it was.
yeah, and then
Butte Creek.
Butte Creek's getting some action too on transfers. I mean, and Kevin's got folks that are trying to come back in. And we talked to him about some staffing things today too. So this is a very complicated thing that Tony's tackled, and I think it's, you know, he's trying to be transparent to you about the economic part of running a school district and how you have to consider all of these things when you're talking about staffing, because you could just leave this like it is and not attend to it, and then you can see it would be out of whack. It would be alligator bill again.
And it compounds through the years, because as you've seen in some of these schools, we're gonna see a trend, at least for a year or two, of kindergarten enrollments down. So you watch that. So that's why when I do the ratios, one of the things I first look at then is, okay, what if I needed to take a teacher there? So that's why I look to see, would their class size then still be at a reasonable ratio? So for instance, you look at, you know, when you look at Evergreen or not Evergreen, but Mark Twain, for instance. And Mark Twain, for me right now, I would call that a bubble school, okay? Because if I removed one teacher there, and because they are a bigger school with more teachers, a change of an individual number student doesn't impact the ratio as much. Where in Evergreen, you can see, one student can make that ratio really crazy, right? Because you have fewer teachers to offset it with. So at Mark Twain, for instance, if we lost a teacher, they would still be right in that technical, statistical sweet spot, okay? While, you know, and then you can see others on the other hand, where if I did, the ones where you see in the pinks and the red, dark reds and all that, those are ones I wouldn't touch right now. I would definitely need at least to spend a little more time monitoring them before that, right? So that's how I do this math.
And one thing that isn't addressed in this either is the grade numbers, because that has an impact.
Yep.
Because as we've seen on all our data, we've got, you know, some
Yeah.
movement in that as far as our grades, and not only across the district, but in individual schools.
Yes.
And so that's another complication on top of this.
Yes, and then what happens is when we do this number, the discussion just doesn't end there. So for instance, with the Scotts Mills point, what we did is we started talking with the principal about what are those scenarios, right? If, you know, with these changes, you know, we asked, so could you come up with a scenario of the grade spans that would work? So exactly, you know, Daniel, we don't get to the point where you got 4 grades in a classroom.
Yeah.
But I will say though, Scotts Mills will have at their middle level, because that's also where we saw the greatest decline in enrollment, they will have a few classes that begin to look like Prattam and Evergreen that have 3 grade levels. But Phil, you're right in the sense that there's some factors we think about. So like for instance, in the last week, Kim and I have had some back and forth conversations with Kevin about his staffing and looking at where the numbers go, because I also have, like for instance, on my screen right now, I have up this presentation, but I also have the enrollment by grade levels that I have of every school, which looks a lot like what the demographer gave us.
Is that something that you could share with us by email?
Yeah, we can give you an updated enrollment.
That'd be
What we did is we would always give it to you at all the.
Been
at
getting it about every other meeting.
Yeah.
We get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Enrollment, yeah, you won't have an accurate enrollment until September,
Yeah.
first week of September.
So I use it for
when you
working
have
right
it,
now, but yeah.
so
We get it, we get it from Heidi,
Yeah.
but it's changing daily right now,
Yeah.
so like, we wouldn't give it to you
helps
because
me
it'd be
wrap my head
wrong.
around
Yeah.
all this that you're.
Yeah, so before I move somebody, I do talk with the principal about what might your configurations look like. Sometimes Kim and I kind of brainstorm about them and whatnot. And then ultimately, at some point, I have to make a recommendation to the superintendent. And in the extreme case, to the board.
So here's my questions. See enrollment, like we'll say, drop by, I don't know, 30 kids. at Mark Twain, and no changes to FTE. And so I'm like, well, they just dropped 30 and Butte Creek just went up like 27. I mean, how hard is, instead of like say firing, why can't we just move somebody around and say, hey, let's go fill that gap because we're one big district? Because if I do it in my head, like 10 kids is a teacher, close to it.
How many?
10.
Oh, like
10
money,
students.
money-wise?
Yes, after insurance,
No.
benefits. So
It's
12,
more.
you know,
So 10, yeah, well, 10 would be $110,000. And our average teacher probably with benefits is like 150.
okay.
So if you look at class
Yeah.
size, okay, an average class size of, if you go by this ratio of 25, you're talking about $270,000, okay? But remember now, if on our numbers, your teacher's gonna cost us between 150 to 170,000, depending on where they're at in the schedule and benefits. But then you remember, every teacher, behind every teacher is also oftentimes some percentage of classified staff. And when you think about a classified staff member, is about 100,000. And when you look on averages, there's about 3/4 of a classified staff member to every licensed member. You have building costs, right? Utility costs and other costs that you go into that. So it becomes very complicated.
So, but my point would be like, if Butte Creek grew that much in 1 year, they're obviously bringing in enough revenue to offset the cost of another teacher.
Well, it would depend on whether, you would only add it if you needed it, Josh. So say you had, just for the examples, this isn't where it is in their enrollment, but say you had 10 extra kids come in and they were spread over 8 grades, 1 in each grade, plus a couple extras. Would you add a teacher at that point?
No.
No, you wouldn't, because your ratio would still be between 24 and 27, depending on the class size. Now, if you had, 20 kids come into grade 5 at Butte Creek, then you've got a problem. And so, like, we have a couple of, sometimes you'll see a blip of higher enrollment in some of these K-8 buildings. So, like, for instance, Kevin has higher enrollment right now in his middle school, because his 5th grade was really big last year. And so we're talking about the potential of adding a middle school position to Butte Creek possibly if we need to. But we're just watching for a little bit. So, I mean, it's like it's not that we're not talking about Butte Creek and it being up and we're ignoring that. We're not ignoring that. But the ratio is still within an acceptable range according to the 309.
Well,
And
it's just like, I know, it's like we had such a huge drop at some of these schools. Obviously, there's somebody within the district we could probably move that wouldn't even justify hiring. Is what I'm
Correct.
saying.
Yeah, sometimes depending on what you actually need. So for instance, if you needed a middle school teacher, you couldn't just move an elementary teacher there. It wouldn't be right to move a K-5 teacher into a language arts class for 8th grade like
And
that.
there's
wouldn't
probably
be.
union contracts too.
And
stuff.
I've actually done that. It's one of the pieces that's on there is that we looked at Robert Frost. Robert Frost for a few years has had a teacher on special assignment. The teacher on special assignment happens to be endorsed in advanced math, and that's an elementary level person, advanced math. Well, it just so happens to be that when we did the look at Scotts Mills, exactly for what they need in the staffing, when we looked at how some of the grades are going to have 3 grade levels, but I'm looking at, so then what do they need for a teacher? So that's why this is now getting to some of the recommended adjustments. You know what, in working with the principal there, what they need with this new configuration is not to have a social studies endorsed teacher. With this new configuration, what they need is somebody who could teach math and or science. So the adjustment I've made is the TOSA at Robert Frost would be reassigned. It's not a net reduction, it's a reassignment then to fill the need, instructional need at Scotts Mills. Now, that does have a trickle effect then, because it means I'm still net high 1 teacher than at Scotts Mills. So what do I do with that 1 position? As of Friday, I would have said, and I need to do this because it's notice to you guys as well as notice to the union, and to say that if it was on at Friday's point, I would have said because of the academic need to move the Robert Frost TOSA to Scotts Mills. And then yes, because I don't have another spot for secondary social studies, I would come to you at the second meeting in August and ask you for the okay for a reduction in force of one secondary social studies licensed educator. Okay. Now, in fairness, all the people that you've seen on this recommendation piece here, I've contacted them. Okay, there's no surprises to any of them. Now, granted, remember my life is doing the people work, and they're not always the most pleasant phone calls, right? But again, before we do any of this work, we're considering several of those factors. So that's why, for instance, Mark Twain, for instance, I mentioned one thing we need to do is we need to monitor Mark Twain in the next week or two, especially the kindergarten level. And the reason why, because if you go back and look at the chart, Josh is right. Mark Twain could lose a student, a teacher, and they would still be pretty good in the ratios. But Mark Twain also has one grade level where their grade level at
They have 75 kids in
yes,
second
at third grade
grade.
level is
Gonna be
ridiculously
30.
off-centered. So she would be having to have, right now, an awful lot of classes that may be a 1-2-3 blend, a 2-3-4 blend, and a 3-4-5 blend. See what I'm saying? To be able to account for all those numbers. So we need to watch that. We need to monitor. Okay, and that's why I'm not using as a suggestion for Kim that we would reduce. So any of the recommendations I made here, they've been through several calculations. Robert Frost, for instance, with the removal of the TOSA, that TOSA is not considered. That TOSA was not considered in this ratio here, because from a mathematical standpoint, when you see Robert Frost here showing 14 teachers, if I add the TOSA, they're really at 15. The TOSA could be reassigned, and one more teacher could be reduced at Robert Frost today, and they would still be at 24.8 students. So mathematically, technically 2 teachers could be reduced at Robert Frost. But the word we're getting is that right now their kinder enrollments are statistically low as an anomaly. So I'm banking on that we're going to see at that school more than others, a little bit more of an enrollment number. But the principal, I've talked with the principal, and she understands that we're watching these numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the math I go through. You are right, Daniel, though, that what's not on this list, which I have on my list of scenarios, are a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Looking at the transfer thing, and we've not done that a lot here. We asked, so part of our conversation with Kevin, for instance, was when he has increased numbers, where is the breakdown of where those numbers are coming from? A lot of them are coming maybe from Malala or Mount Angel, or now we have some of our religious private schools in the area that more students are coming back from. But it's important for me to also ask, well, might some of those numbers be taking away numbers from a Prattam or a Mark Twain, right? Because then in some of those cases, we have to think about or let's say the worst case in Evergreen. If there were Evergreen students who were going to a few of these schools like Central Howell and Butte Creek, where there are a little bit of an increase in number of students, would I be able to save, quote unquote, a position at Evergreen by saying, well, maybe the Butte Creek, a few of those families need to go back to their school of geographic enrollment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So those are all considerations I
Yeah.
have to make, and then yes, of course,
Because according
what
to
they call
this,
the doomsday one is,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course, at some point
according
is
to
at
this,
school,
we're down
right?
123 students, right? From enrollment of September 24 to August 7th of 25.
Yeah.
So
So for every
That's-
school I see an
that's-
increase in enrollment,
that's
I have to
3
go to the
teachers
school that sees a
according to the
decrease
chart.
in enrollment and try to figure out why and where are they going.
But
And
where?
you're,
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't get this information last year in this way because we just done a reduction in force, but this is a common practice for a district to look at this, and it's an important, it's like a check and a balance to see if you're in the right ratio area. And just because we're showing you this, I mean, he's spending half an hour explaining it to you, but Tony and I have worked on this for, hours and hours and hours trying to, talk about it and figure it out and talk to principals. I mean, Tony's called lots of people and, really meeting and trying to meet building needs, but not, in an irresponsible way, like,
Yeah.
like previously.
Because this is, I mean, this comes down to student experience and teacher's experience, right? I mean, this is the essential, like, the quality of teaching goes down if you go too much in the red,
Right, that's why
right?
you, yeah,
And
correct.
the stress level on the teacher
Yeah, we don't want
goes
that
up.
either.
And
probably exponentially
Oh, yeah, and then
with
the
the
oth-
color change.
Yeah, and then the other factor I look at is even with the experience, you mentioned the experience of the teacher, I also look at the micro level. So that teacher, him or herself, how many years have they been experienced? So that was part of the factoring in Scotts Mills
Yeah.
that I used because of the level of experience, their grade level experience, where they've been teaching and whatnot. So for instance, like, and the last point I'll make on this, why this is something that's always in flux and it's going to be, as I started in my presentation, how I started. This is gonna be something that's gonna be in flux. You know, there's a 1 week that I don't make change, which is the 5 days actually before school, because then I'm potentially playing with fire a little bit. But what I'll do then is, then I'll wait till I get day 1 numbers, day 3 numbers, day 5 numbers, okay? And then I have to decide if I make that first or second day 10 enrollment adjustment. But Butte Creek, over the weekend, we found out that 309 number may be closer to 316. So when I redid the ratio on that, it doesn't show here, but that 26.3 then is closer to 20.27, right? And Kim and I are in active conversations right now about we do that. One of the challenges becomes, though, does it become a full FTE, a full-time teacher there?
Yeah.
Principals, I would be openly honest, principals hate it when I go to them and say, maybe a 0.6 would be an option. Now, is it the best scenario in all cases? I've been a school level person, I know that. But again, part of my responsibility is right-sizing the entire district. Okay, so so there are some things that we're already looking at with Butte Creek. Is it the entire solution that I think someone would want? No. But is it a solution? When I look at the overall district numbers, it is a solution.
Well, and our district is particularly complicated. So, you know, in other districts our size, there's maybe 5 or 6 buildings, not this level. And so it really does make it more difficult to figure out the staffing. It is a formula. It has to be a formula, because if you don't approach it in a formulaic way, you will end up with the same problem you had previously, and that will not happen on our watch.
Because, for instance, there are a lot of these schools where everybody would, well, not everybody, but for instance, in the years past, I guarantee you the Central Howe principal would come to you and say, or would have come to administration and said, well, we're over 25, so I need a teacher. And my analysis, this is, again, just my analysis on my experience, is that, okay. But you have to answer the question then, before you say, okay, how is it impacting the rest of my district? If I'm not willing to consider where I might be heavily staffed, then I should question myself if I'm just considering only where I'm lightly staffed.
Yeah,
Right.
well, and you have to make sure that you don't start kind of generating intra-district transfer for advantageous ratio of teacher to student,
Yeah.
right? And so you don't want to penalize some group over the other. I appreciate the effort and the calculation and the explanation. As far as I'm concerned, it's helpful.
I would suggest
Gives you a
that
better picture.
once we have real numbers, that some of this be shared with through the principal to the parents clubs, particularly at Evergreen, Prattam, Scotts Mills, and Silvercrest. In years past, they've seen these type of numbers, particularly at Evergreen, and they went and rallied and they've got more kids to come in.
Yep.
I would expect that to happen again.
Yeah, and another thing I will do, I'm planning on doing, is we saw that demographic report this evening. Give me a month or 2 to get into the school year and get everybody settled, but what I will do then is also analysis like this. I'll do a more projective staffing analysis using some of that data, because again, what you do with people today in terms of staffing does have an impact tomorrow, right? Because you establish trends, you also establish expectations, right? And there are a lot of factors to consider. But what I'm giving you right now is the
numbers that I'm looking at when I make my calculations right now. Okay, again, it's one set of that. Nothing that I've done here is not without first talking with Kim about the ramifications of that. That's why, honestly, you only see the only one I've really done was that Scotts Mills one. That's because, like I said, they would have to gain 25 to 30 more students for it to even make sense that I wouldn't think about.
I mean, that's a
removing one
dramatic
teacher.
drop.
That's huge.
Okay.
No, this is good, and having this data and watching this, because it's been mentioned, if it wasn't followed, if it existed before, and it certainly wasn't followed, or we wouldn't have been in the situation.
Yeah.
But also, we want to be sure we don't look at this just in a vacuum. And that's where
Right.
we've talked about the different things as far as bubble of grades, credentials of teachers, all those pieces. We can't, because bottom line is, we want those kids well educated, and we want to raise test scores.
Right.
And so that's got to be in there.
Yeah, one of the scenarios I've done many years, more than actually reducing a teacher because of enrollment, I have made because of enrollment shifts across schools or at grade levels. I've done a fair amount of reassignment of teachers once I know the enrollments,
Yeah.
right? Because with an enrollment trend, I might see, like, for instance, at a K-8 school, for instance, I may see there being a real strong bump in maybe the 3rd through 4th grade level, where I see a significant drop in the 6-8 level, which is partly what's happened there
Yeah.
now, in which case, when you're right-sizing staff, you're also right-sizing again based on their skill set and the competence. And I don't mean this competence in the bad way, it's actually what language in the law talks about, right? Experience, competence, and licensure, right? That's another piece. It's not all about reducing a net number. It's about making sure your people are at the right places
Yeah.
for what you
Right.
need.
Yeah, there's
Right.
a science to this, but there's also an art to it. And it
Yeah,
looks
it's
like
a
you got a
fine
good
art.
grasp on it, so
It's both,
I
yeah.
appreciate it.
So, thank you. I know it's a
Okay.
lot, but I think this is a piece that should be done with the board every year.
Yeah.
And then, yes, at some point, there should be a condensed way of letting the community see how these change through time,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Well, even being here and having it that's a step forward in that direction.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, superintendent evaluation process. I'll turn the floor over to Derek on this one.
Yeah, Dan, if you can bring up the PowerPoint, I'll grab the clicker. All right, so we have this as a discussion item tonight. My plan is to kind of unpack it a little bit and kind of work us through the process. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look at the documents that were sent out, and there's kind of two different routes that we can go. This presentation is built on the superintendent evaluation that OSBA and COSA has put together. That's the model that we used last year. Obviously open to tweaking that if there's any tweaks that need to be made, or if new board members have insight on how to move forward. With that, we'll talk a little bit about, the importance of why we do this. We'll talk about our role as board members. I'll do kind of a high-level timeline, and I've got a more detailed timeline about what this should look like. And then we'll discuss a couple of the evaluation tools that OSBA and COSA put together. Where we're at tonight is that pre-evaluation stage. We're just starting to have the conversation about what we'd like our process to look like. And then my goal for tonight is to hopefully get kind of a head nod or some consensus about, yep, we like what we've seen, and move forward. But we'll actually take action at a later board meeting. So this is something that's actually on the executive summary from OSBA and COSA, and I think it highlights the importance of what we want to try and accomplish. And it basically says, as you can see there, that when we as a board work well with our superintendent, our students thrive. And I think that's a good standpoint for us to have, is that we want that cohesiveness. We can have robust conversations, but at the end of the day, we really want the board and the superintendent to be working as a high-functioning team. So our role, one of I think our most important roles, is to give our superintendent good, clear direction, so that she feels like she has the confidence to move forward with kind of the vision that we as a board have. when we start talking about the evaluation, obviously we want her to know kind of what we're going to grade her on, so that the expectations are clear ahead of time, so that she can make sure she's meeting those objectives. The bottom bullet point there, again, it's one of our most important roles. We have one employee that we're responsible for. So one, making sure that we do give good guidance and that we are providing feedback on the back end as well. So this is not in the OSBA literature. I thought it was important. We discussed it last year, and I think it's important as well. A couple things, like when we start talking about the standards, some of them are a little bit more lofty. And so as we work through talking about the goals, I think we have to make sure, one, that they're achievable and the time that we allow for them. So one of the things we've had some conversations about is a strategic plan, a vision that takes time to put together. So if that becomes something that we would like to see, just making sure that it's within a reasonable time that she's able to accomplish that. As I mentioned here, we're at the pre-evaluation stage. Throughout the year, there will be check-in meetings. Kim does a great job of keeping us up to speed with progress. In the literature, it talks about quarterly. I feel more like we're getting that at every board meeting. She does a phenomenal job of that. March 15th, we start gathering some of the evidence and artifact documents to show these were the goals, these were the standards, and this is what Kim has to provide for that. The evaluation results, and I'll talk more about this. We did last year a targeted survey, and I think that was beneficial to the board to get some outside feedback outside of our direct interactions with Kim. And so that's on there for us as a conversation piece. And then at the end of this, we as a board come together with one voice, and we'll put together a summary document and provide Kim with kind of like, here's your grade for the last year. So this is again in the COSA and OSBA literature. It's just the evaluation tool. It's just a summary of it. I'll unpack the standards here momentarily, but we start with the standards. Generally, the superintendent will come up with 1 to 3 goals that are built in tandem with the performance objectives. And then, like I mentioned, the evidence of performance, feedback, and the evaluation summary. Okay, so on the left there are all the different standards, which there's 8. One of the things we talked about last year, I think it applies this year. That's a lot to really kind of tackle in a year. And so last year, and I would suggest for consideration, we placed some prioritization on a couple standards. I think that really helps the superintendent kind of laser focus on, hey, we as a board think you'll hit all these 8, but we really want you to focus on these, 1 to 3, 1 to 5, just so it's a little bit more tangible, I think, to digest. And again, last year she did a great job hitting all these, but again, if we as a board have specific ones we'd like her to see, I think we can add some weight to that. I left this up here from last year, that bottom bullet point on the right, and we didn't work this in, but there was conversation about having something that is specific to students. I think it's important, so just as we kind of work through for consideration, if there's somehow that we can work just the word student, so that we're being student-centered, I think is important. So for something else to consider.
Derek, I got a question on the previous slide about when you went and gathered other information from others. Was that raw information shared with Kim?
Yeah, so what that looked like, yes and no. So we use that for information to inform the board. And so we did a target feedback survey, and we worked with WSD and sent that to most of her direct reports. And so we as a board were able to see kind of some of those blind spots, right? If you think about our role, we have our interactions with Kim, but I think it's important, like, how's the communication working with Kim, like that type of information.
When in my previous life, we did perception surveys, and it was meant for our use as the employee to improve themselves. And I think that raw information can be really valuable to whether the perceptions are valid or not. At least there's somebody's perception, and they need to be aware. The employee needs to be aware of that.
I'm open to exploring that, and talk to Kim about that as well. But I think that's valuable information that could be shared.
Okay.
Any other questions so far? Okay, so I'm going to kind of zip through the standards. I'm not going to hit every descriptor. I'll kind of hit a few highlights. Visionary district leadership. We've had some recent discussions about strategic plan, getting the vision. This is obviously a more lofty long-term goal. Last year, Kim had a ton of fires that she had to address all simultaneously. So I think that was a little bit harder to really like zero in on of like, what does the future look like as opposed to like putting out the fires right now. So I think this first bullet point, the district mission, I think we keep coming back of like, we want to have our entire district on the same page moving forward. So I think this visionary district leadership standard, I think, is more important this year. And then also Kim has, give me just a second, is not in that interim position anymore. She's really in a solidified superintendent, has, the ability to kind of carry that out over multiple terms.
Now, I would think that some of this kind of falls on us too, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would have associated goals with this, and we're actually going to talk to you at the next work session about the strategic plan. So Willamette ESD is coming in to present about that, and that is directly related to this visionary goal.
I guess I just want to make sure that we're not approaching this where we put everything on you, when in reality, I think a lot of this is on us also.
It's
So-
not just on you, it's on teachers,
Yeah.
it's on classified,
Yeah.
it's on community. Like, this
Yeah.
is a huge, like,
Yeah.
process. Yeah, true.
So the second standard, again, looking at the workbook, is the ethics and professional norms. I'm going to highlight the middle and the last bullet points. Kim also does a great job of this, making ethical and legal decisions and recommendations. And that can get tense when, maybe the community doesn't agree with a certain policy or certain law, but it's law, and we expect her to provide us legal and ethical decision-making. And then the last bullet point, Josh really speaks this a lot, but modeling the way, and I think Kim does that through her actions and modeling that ethical behavior. So that's one of the standards as well. Inclusive district culture, we have a really diverse community, and this is, I think, can be challenging to make sure that you're accommodating and open to all the different viewpoints in the district, and Kim's done a great job of this. I think it's the middle bullet point where it talks about opportunities, resources, necessary to support the success and well-being of each student. I think Tony was talking a little bit of that, of balancing out the district as best we can, but that's, again, one of the standards, and these are a couple of the descriptors inside that standard. Again, standard 4 kind of ties into what I just mentioned there. The second bullet point down, I think this is one that we've heard staff talk about quite a bit over the last year, is that professional development piece. And in Kim's report earlier, she really kind of highlighted some things that are taking place right now. So that instructional leadership and improvement, I see signs of that, but that would be one of the descriptors of this standard, is that, that specific focus on trying to increase the teaching capacity and support our teachers so that they can best teach and educate our kiddos. Communication, community relations. Let's see if there's anything specific I want to hit on this. Bottom bullet point. This last year, obviously, with the questions around state funding to begin with, and then the federal grants, Kim's been a really good advocate for our district at multiple levels of advocating for students. She mentioned that she was at a Rotary meeting earlier, so that being one involved in the community, advocating for our students, again, just some of the descriptors within the standard. Let's see. Standard 6, this was one that I think last year we placed some emphasis on as well, the effective organizational management. We had a lot of issues. Even earlier today with the hiring, we're still seeing that organizational leadership and management piece. I think this is going to continue to be a really important standard for us to consider if we want to place emphasis on. Again, just with the complexity of our district, multiple buildings, staffing things right. So and you can see the various descriptors in there as well. Effective financial management. I think we've seen good progress and pretty amazing progress, actually, in the last year from where we were at a year ago. But again, this is where the rubber meets the road. We've got to have a financially sound district so that we can do all the things that we want to be able to do. And then policy and governance. Let's see if there's anything specific I want to hit on. I don't think there's any specific thing I want to pull out on here. So these are, again, all in the workbook. This is what we used last year, kind of our process and standard. And what that looked like is we pushed this out to all the board members at the end of the year. We did a survey. It was pretty cost effective with using WSD, where we were able to provide our feedback. And we sat down as a board and had conversations about the standards as we worked through. Any questions thus far?
Just a comment. I just remember how hard it was doing the evaluation. It seems like those categories bled over to one another.
They do.
They use a lot of the same repetitive language, and it was like, how do so if there was a way maybe to clean those categories up with the language so it's easier to evaluate, but I don't know how you do that.
So first question is, we kind of have got a couple more slides and I'll wrap up. If I get rough head nods of like, yes, this seems how we want to move forward, or if there's conversations about a different process to use. If there's specific descriptors that you would like to see added or change, you can email me those directly, and then when we come back together in September, I can go through specifically kind of the language that we'd like to see. Obviously, Kim gets a voice in that as well, but maybe we can clean up some of the language that we don't like. Again, this is just touching on the goals, which Kim will build and present. Generally 1 to 3 specific goals, kind of based again on the standards. And again, should be based on strategic initiatives and then things that she directly has input or influence over. I'll skip. This is just a sample. It's in the documentation. And this touches on the target feedback. That was something you mentioned, or both Daniel and Wally. I think this is useful. I found it useful for the board. And the thought is that we as board members probably have some blind spots. I think the next step could be providing some of that information back to Kim, like Wally mentioned, as well. What it did, I think, for last year's board is help to fill in some of those blind spots. I think it can probably be odd if you're the one being graded by your subordinates. And the way I think the board took that information was, we're looking for kind of the middle. Kim talks about the middle a lot. So I think, if Kim had to take, adverse action against me, I'm her employee, and I didn't like that, and then I give her a bad evaluation, I think we could probably tease that out, like, oh, Derek was potentially upset about this.
There's outliers.
Right. So we're kind of teasing out those outliers.
We can do that, but I think it's important to Kim to recognize those outliers are out there.
So I think for the 3 of us last year, I found that to be beneficial.
I felt it was.
Well, largely because we'd gotten feedback that they hadn't really been heard. So it was nice to actually get that feedback back. And it was really positive feedback as well.
I apologize about this slide. It's super small, but it is on board book. This is the detailed timeline that we would work through. The next kind of big piece for us, again, would be at the September 8th meeting. And that's where we would actually take action to finalize our process. Historically, this has fallen on the vice chair. Aaron passed it to me, and I took on that role last year. If other folks want to be involved in that, I'm all ears, and I will happily bring you into the fold as we work through this.
No human resource for me.
You did a really good job.
You did a great job.
Debbie had a huge play in that as well, so her and I worked quite well together. So the next step for us is would be at the September 8th board meeting. That gives us a little time to digest the standards, do some of maybe the wordsmithing piece, and then potentially, get that back to me, and I can incorporate that. And then we'd go specifically over the standards, any tweaks and descriptors, and then we would take action on it as a board.
So to help the process, could you give me instructions on what you want me specifically to do between now and the September meeting?
Yeah, so now,
So I can put it together?
Yes.
And say, for the benefit of the process and the
Yes.
timeline?
so first next step is, it's a lot of material, go through it again, digest it, get comfortable with it. And if there aren't any substantial changes to the standards that you would like to see, then I'll take no information as fine. If there's a additional descriptor or a tweak in descriptor,
Or
then just,
reduction in descriptors?
or reduction,
or
email me that directly.
Clarification of descriptors, but, yeah,
Email that to me directly and I can incorporate that.
okay.
And then I'll go back through our specifics at the next board meeting. So
Okay.
review the material, any tweaks, and then
Like Josh talked, reducing some of the bleeding of going
Yeah.
over into the other.
Kim, what about you? How'd it go for you? Anything you
I-
want to change?
No, I thought it was a good process. It's an unusual process. It's not how superintendents are. I mean, the survey part of it is a little unusual. Usually it's just the board that does that. But, and I didn't actually see that survey last year. I know I heard it was very positive from a couple people, but I didn't actually see it. So, and I don't know that that's really important. I think as long as you know, understand that my work is very complex, and sometimes I have to tell people things they don't want to hear. And being able to have those difficult conversations with employees and patrons, and that's really an important part of my job. And if I couldn't do that, I would not be good at this. So just as long as you realize that, you know, in those, that I will not always make everyone happy. So, I
Did
mean-
you, were you fine with the way we got that information to you? I mean, we didn't give you the
Yeah.
specifics of it, but we gave you the,
Yeah, you gave me the
General
generalities
feel,
of it. Yeah,
yeah.
I think that was good. Yeah, I thought it was fine. I had no problem with it at all, so.
And Derek, I just recommend we go into executive session again for our discussion. The discussion
When we get to
portion.
that point, yeah.
When because don't we have to decide
to
that officially by September 8th? We take action on the actual process, right? Or is that?
Yeah, so it'll be September 8th, and that's just taking action on the process.
the process.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
yeah.
But the actual, like, providing the summary feedback that we
Yes.
did on the back
Yeah.
half, that we did in
Yeah.
executive session.
Yeah.
As far as the timeline, so again, next board, or September 8th board meeting, we take action on it, and then November 10th, we'd be looking at kind of our first progress report, and then we can talk more at that session about if we want to continue the target feedback survey, if we want to expand it.
Right.
But that's when we discuss that further, and then January would be the next kind of progress report. And then January 1st to the 15th, we actually work through the target feedback survey process. And what that looked like last year is Debbie was able to contact with WSD, give them our standards. They were able to push out a Survey Monkey, which didn't cost us any additional money. And it was pretty quick getting that information. I think it took them 3 to 4 days to get the information back to the board.
It's pretty efficient.
And then February is when we will do our evaluation. By that time, we should have the target feedback survey, if we choose to do that. And then we would do our own board evaluations. Then we would come together as a board and talk about our individual kind of rankings. And then we speak with one voice. We kind of decide where we collectively land. And then we put together a summary that goes back to Kim. Any questions? Phil or Josh or
No.
Tom or Wally, anything that I've missed?
No, you covered
You
it.
do a great job, Derek.
Kim, anything to add?
No, I think your process was really thorough last year, Derek. I thought it was really great, the way the board evaluated me. It was a good experience, and I think my goals will be a little different this year, you know. With strategic planning, I'll probably have a goal around that. I'm not entirely sure I still shouldn't have a financial goal. That might still need some attention, so, yeah, I will work on, you know, getting some of those together, too,
Okay.
so.
All right, that's all I have.
All right, thanks, Derek, great job, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, correct, we've got a, in our packet, we've got a corrected calendar draft on the budget. There was a couple of little faux pas that have been cleaned up, and
Do we need to approve that?
I don't believe so, since it's corrected.
I think it's fine.
I made some errors on
I saw it. but-
Yeah, when I was putting, I still have to reserve this room, I was going through the system and I realized I made a couple errors. I don't know if I just picked not an updated copy, so they were corrections.
Okay.
Yeah.
The two September dates were already approved in the prior year. I had just
Oh, so we're
shifted-
covered.
Shifted.
I
Okay.
shifted, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so. Work sessions at school buildings, you've kind of already touched on this, Kim.
I did. I touched on that during my superintendent report. Yeah, I just really think that this will be a good opportunity for us to meet at school buildings and check out what teachers and kids are up to, and give you guys a tour and get to work on some of these long-range facility
And
issues.
and as I said before, I think it's a good practice to get us as a board out there in the community, the
Yeah.
whole community. Okay. Board goals. This is gonna seem like a common theme, but last year was a little different than our other years. Boards traditionally, we have goals for the year, just like we expect our superintendent to, we expect our other personnel, they turn in goals to whoever their supervisor is. And the board should also have some goals for the year. Traditionally, these would be, as always, the 3 to 4. You don't want to get crazy with how many. But a little bit of homework assignment. This will kind of work into our workshop because this strategic plan business that we're going to be talking about, board goals traditionally get incorporated in that. They're a piece of that, obviously. And so, and board goals generally hit, the academics, the finance, the communication or community culture piece, and communications back and forth. And what I'd encourage you to do between now and then, I thought about putting a bunch of samples together for you, and I thought, you're big people, you can take time to do this. Just about any school district you think of, but there'll be some that won't. But most schools, if you just go to their district site and put in board goals in your search, you'll find them to get some ideas of what's out there. Some get a little what I'd consider overboard. Some get a little too, plain and easy. But board goals should be along the lines of things that we have influence over and can not control, but influence and guide in that area. So between now and the workshop meeting, maybe as individuals, is jot down I have some ideas on where some ideas of goals, and then as a board we need to come up with formulating those. And I'm going to reserve a timeline as far as when we do that until I kind of see where this workshop on the strategic plan takes us, and then we'll go from there. Clear as mud?
I would like one just idea from you, just
Sure.
so I can kind of wrap my head around what we're looking for.
Uh-huh.
Can you shoot one?
Oh, sure, that we would, something along the lines of watching out for the buildings, maintenance of the buildings, and making sure our facilities are up to snuff. And so we'd have something that we could measure, that we'd work towards that when we review it at the end of the year, Yeah, we did, we authorized, or set money aside and authorized this much. Or we've kept, in efforts to, as far as academics, encourage increase in graduation rates or reading rates and things like this along those lines.
And it'd actually have to be a goal that we could actually affect, like us, like
Well, influence,
influence.
yeah, and so. All right. Membership on Policy and Finance Committee. I'll take one committee at a time here. First of all, Finance Committee is a committee of the board. It's a subcommittee of the board, I should say. And we had, last year, we had 3 board members on it, Tom, Josh, and myself. Tom obviously won't be on it this year. And so basically looking for people that would want on or want off of that committee. And for this meeting, we meet approximately quarterly on
I'm
it.
okay stepping down from that.
Is this a request, or is it like you want to be polite and you don't want to hog it?
Yeah.
No, it's just a lot.
Yeah.
Because I was also doing policy.
You were on both,
Yeah, Josh was on both.
Josh
And
was on
then rec board meetings, work sessions,
so.
it just gets to be like quite a bit.
Can you tell me the list of the different committees before I volunteer for one or two?
Those are the 2.
Of the 2?
Yeah,
Policy
and policy
finance?
isn't technically a board committee, it's superintendent's committee, and we have couple board reps on it.
Okay.
I'd be happy to be on that one,
On which?
policy. I'd be happy to do either, but
Okay, well,
I'll do policy.
on policy, we have, Josh is on policy and Derek was. Derek stepped down, his work life, it just didn't work well for him anymore because of his job's change. Josh, were you wanting to stay on policy?
I would like to unless Kim wants me off.
I
a
think you
loaded
asked
question.
really good questions, and I think you should stay on one or the other. But I don't think you should do both, because you
Yeah.
have family.
I'd like to stay on
That's
policy.
that's a
Okay.
lot.
I would volunteer on finance.
Okay, so Wally, you volunteer for policy?
Mhm.
Okay, finance,
Apply my budget boot camp
Your
knowledge.
analytical mind. It's super
We-
exciting.
I am, actually.
we had 3 by rule, technically, board chairs on finance
Well, if it's the rule, it's the rule.
by.
You can't get away from it.
Well, yeah. And so, I and Daniel, do we have anyone else like to be on finance?
We can have up to 3.
We could have up to 3. We don't need to have 3. We could have 2 now when,
Miss Delisky.
If I were to be on one, it would be policy,
Okay.
but
well, we'll leave it at 2 right now and check back maybe when we've filled Tom's position and bring it up again. Is that fine with everybody? Okay. Once again, do we have anyone here in the audience that has public comment? No, you can't look. I'm looking at you.
Come on.
Do we have anyone online?
I can't
Use the
see
raise
number.
hand feature.
I can't even see the number if there's people online.
No.
Okay. Okay. Any future agenda item requests?
I don't know if it's for work session or for agenda, but I sure would like to dive more into this statistical analysis of enrollment and migration, intra-district, extra-district options. I have a ton of questions. Surprise, surprise. I have a ton of questions on the legality of cross-enrollment and open enrollment with other districts. Are we allowed to recruit? Are we,
Okay.
I have questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would like
Okay.
to dive further into that.
Okay,
please.
got the general idea. as to what
I
you're
can
looking
pull
for.
some of that information for you, and then I also can pull some homeschool data and some other things for you. Yeah, I'll see what I can come up with.
I do want an update on something for clarification. Our hybrid program, how's that looking?
Yeah, 46 kids in the hybrid, I believe, last time I talked to Jen.
Okay.
So, but enrollment opened on the 16th, so I haven't talked to her yet this week, so I don't know if she has anything
Somebody
new in
had
the mix.
mentioned, that like, oh yeah, they're not offering. I'm like, well, hold on, I'm not sure. I think it's only for high school, and I think they kind of had a cap, but.
It's middle and high school, and
Okay.
we're capped at, if we go over 60, then we are gonna have to hire another teacher, so we wanna make sure that, we're still under the threshold, so. But we could take more students in that program.
I would love, maybe
monthly reports at the beginning, like how that's going? Because I
Okay.
think you said we're a pilot program in the state relatively.
It's
for
kind of
that.
an unusual program. Usually, if you have that, a hybrid, this is a hybrid where they can take some live instruction and they can do some credit by proficiency for like if they have work study or something outside the classroom, and then they also can take some online courses. So yeah, it's kind of an unusual program. Each student has their own individualized education plan, which all students should kind of have that anyway, but this is very specific, and, you know, Jen's working with some families that came back from homeschool. She's working with some treatment programs that are sending kids in, and it's just a large, you know, people that are out of the area, so some are gonna be mostly online, and, I mean, it's a whole variety of things, yeah.
It's super exciting.
Yeah, it's really complicated to manage. I'm glad she's
Yeah, it sounds-
managing it, yeah.
It sounds like, Kim, how does that, you know, are groups of the people choosing that, or is that responsible for some of the enrollment declines we're seeing? Sometimes, you know, it gets to be a thing in a building. You know, me and, you know, a couple, 3 families decide to go do something. You know, are they going hybrid? And how does that affect our enrollment
At the other buildings?
where does the enrollment for that program show up on our enrollment chart?
So that is a program underneath the high school. So I could pull it out and show you, but it actually shows it's a program underneath the high school and middle school. So it has middle school and high school kids in it. And so it doesn't have its own separate school ID number.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, you know, as I look at these numbers and how students are moving, here's another little piece of the puzzle, you know, of how kids flow.
Yeah, we were pretty careful about that piece of the puzzle not to, you know, it's not meant for a student that's being successful in one of our brick and mortar buildings.
Okay.
It's meant for a student that needs a particular plan to suit their individualized needs. It's really individualized. And
Okay.
I think about 13 of those kids are new to the district and were not in our district previously, so that's an add-on, which is great.
Okay.
And then some were kids that, you know, might have gone to Sequoia or might have, you know, were already on an alternate path with a counselor. So it's an interesting program. I think it's going to be, I mean, Jen has one of the most effective alternative programs in the state.
Yeah.
Her graduation rate's probably higher than any else. I should check because I'm sure it's the highest in the state.
Wow.
She gets kids to graduate, and they have a really cool thing at Sequoia. It's very cool.
Yeah, that's
So.
neat. That's neat. It's just trying to figure out trying to spot the trends before they come so we can be there to meet the kid, you know, place people in the right positions and things like that.
Yeah,
Like Tony
and
said.
Jen thinks that program will continue to grow.
Okay.
As more people learn about it. So
Nice.
we haven't done a ton of marketing for it yet because we're trying to get our feet under us first before we get too busy pushing it out. Because you want to make sure that it's run effectively and that, you know, the program works good for kids and that we have a system in place that doesn't let anybody fall through the cracks. So
Sure.
Yeah, that's really
Okay.
good numbers for not promoting it.
it is that's due to Jen. Jen promoted it. We did Debbie did a letter mailer to people that had left the district for a variety of reasons, and so we got some of those people back. So, you know, I think some of our families need a more flexible option that gives them, you know, just some different choices, and so we're trying to meet that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome, Tom.
I have one last question. I promise it's the last one. Who else aside me is following all this cell phone restriction
Oh,
policies?
Good job.
Okay.
Yeah.
This
oh
is,
my good
it's
Lord.
going to be fascinating.
It
and I
is
think-
gonna be
I
fascinating.
think
Yeah.
we can definitely follow, depending on which way it goes. Right?
Yeah,
We can
yeah.
have the other people suffer, and
Yeah.
then we can just jump in.
You know, we already did some of that work in the high school last year. So we had a no cell phone policy during class instruction, and that worked pretty good. We didn't restrict it, and Emily probably could tell you more about this. We didn't restrict it necessarily at lunch so much. So this is bell to bell, folks.
Right.
It is
Yeah.
like
Bell to
opening bell, and I said, is it period to period bell, like in between? And then OD's like, no, Kim. So it is like the start of the day to the end of the day. And, you know, I think I think we're gonna meet about this with our admin team tomorrow, and Tony did a bunch of research, and Elise Hansen did a bunch of research, and we have other people's policies, and we will work on policy for it. We have to have the policy in place by October 31st, and we have to have the system in place by January 1st. And so, you know, we have a little time. It's not gonna be difficult to figure out what to do. Other districts are, you know, we're all working on it at the same time. I mean, if it was my choice, I would make a backpack policy. Your cell phone has to be in your backpack, have it put away. I would not spend money on a Yonder pouch, because we did that in Dallas, and it was a pain in the patootie. It was really difficult to manage.
No, kids have already found ways around that.
Yeah,
Yep.
well, and
I
it
can tell you
just
from
was.
kids I know in other districts.
It was just really difficult. I think what we need to come up with is, you know, I took some feedback from a couple of parents over the summer who called and said, Kim, did you think about this? And I'm like, nope, didn't think about that. Sometimes our high school kids, so like juniors and seniors, they take courses outside of our building. So they'll take a Shemeketa course. And at times, you have all done the two-factor authentication on your phone for all kinds of things. Well, when you're registering for a class, it sends you a code, and you have to get in here and do your thing. And so we had a student who wasn't able to register for a class because we had confiscated her phone and made a parent come get it, and she missed the window to register for a class. So we have to be really mindful about, we don't want that to negatively impact kids. So how do we, you know, what is the workaround for that? Are we really mindful about when those deadlines are, and can we, you know, make sure that we just have the right system in place so that it doesn't punish somebody unnecessarily. And then the other thing that OD and the governor, they don't want this to be like punishment for students that would keep them out of class. So
Right.
like we're not gonna expel, no suspension, none of that. It's a learning process, and I think, you know, we all have to learn how to manage social media and phones and all those different things. And I think in the long run, this will be really good for our kids. Like when I was here in the high school, there's a drastic difference between this high school where the kids aren't on their phones. They were making connections, they were talking, and Ms. Rayo could tell you about that, talking to each other. And you know, I didn't see kids like this at lunch. Like they're visiting, like it was a healthier environment, and I think overall it will be healthier. There are exceptions for students if they have a diabetic, the monitor, so they can use their phone to monitor. So all those health plans that are in place where kids need to use their phone to access any of those apps or anything, those are all exclusions that we will work through on 504 plans. Same way with an IEP. If we have a student that has an app on their phone that is part of their accommodation or something they need to access for their health on their IEP, that is also permissible.
Don't forget about the smart watches.
Yeah, no smartwatch.
My daughter's
Smart
saying
glasses.
that's a bigger problem.
Yep. Yeah, actually that, I know when I stopped wearing my smartwatch because I'd be in a meeting and it would go off and
Yeah.
I would read it, and I'm like, I gotta stop doing that. So I actually stopped wearing it. So, because this I can close and just ignore. But the watch I couldn't ignore. Of course, if there's a fire or something in your superintendent, that might be good. So, I mean, there's a downside to everything, right?
Yeah.
Why they invented alarms.
Yeah, right.
Tony will take care of it.
without it.
So we'll have more, we should have more for you soon on that. Probably at the work session. We would probably have our admin recommendations. We're gonna work on those tomorrow.
Okay. We're adjourned.